Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 8 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as Raza of the Sand and brought greatness to the Sand Village. Let the tale begin. Chapter 176, White Snake Scales. The news of the Four Tails Jinchuriki and Five Tails Jinchuriki from Iwabakure being captured by Tsunagekyure's Kazekage spread throughout the world. It immediately pressed the pause button on the entire shinobi world, which was already caught in the chaos of war. Upon receiving the news, Inoki, the Tsuchikage of Iwabakure, was naturally furious. However, after venting his emotions, Inoki chose the wisest course of action. He immediately ordered the ninjas from both of the village's battlefronts to retreat 10 miles and cease their attack on Tsunagakure. Just as Raza had predicted, Inoki was not willing to gamble. If Iwabakure continued their attack and Tsunagakure chose to take drastic measures and directly killed the two Jinchuriki, even though the tailed beasts themselves couldn't die, the loss of the Jinchuriki would be devastating to the village. Additionally, the cost of recapturing the tailed beasts was not something Iwabakure could bear at this moment, especially during such a chaotic time in the shinobi world. One wrong move could cause Iwabakure to fall into an irreparable situation. After receiving the news, the third Raikage of Kumogakure also made the same decision. He quickly ordered the Eight Tails Jinchuriki, who was still on the battlefield, to return to the village. Although Kumogakure had not suffered any direct losses, the Raikage had already lost Iwabakure as an ally and now had to face Tsunagakure alone. Moreover, the display of power by Tsunagakure had greatly unsettled him. Particularly, the appearance of the Scorch-release ninja Pakura and the Magnet-release ninja Michikawa, who had joined the hunt for the Four Tails and Five Tails, now arriving in the Land of Rivers, made the Third Raikage believe that Kumogakure had no chance of victory. In contrast to the anger and frustration of the ninjas from Iwabakure and Kumogakure, Tsunagakure had no intention of hiding the news. Therefore, the ninjas and civilians of Tsunagakure, upon hearing the news, were filled with immense excitement. The display of power by Kazekage, Pakura, and Michikawa, as well as the possibility of avoiding the continuation of the war, had elevated their admiration for the three to its peak. The entire village of Suna was engulfed in a joyous and enthusiastic atmosphere. This caused those with malicious intent hiding in Tsunagakure to retreat and lie low once more, caught between reluctance and fear. Dragon Oasis. This is where the God Tree resides. Unlike the God Tree that had been transformed from the Ten Tails in his memory, this God Tree in Dragon Oasis did not seem to have grown significantly larger due to an increase in chakra. In fact, compared to the other massive trees of Dragon Oasis, it could be considered relatively small. If it weren't for the seals and sculptures surrounding it, it would be difficult to distinguish it from the other trees. Raza was unsure if this was due to the surrounding sealing techniques, the container below limiting its growth, or the chakra he had provided not being enough. However, he didn't feel dissatisfied, so he didn't mind. Raza's sole purpose for coming here today was to use the power of the God Tree he had created to train. With this in mind, Raza took out a scroll from his pocket. As the seal on the scroll was undone, a palm-sized, jade-white scale appeared before him. This was the scale gifted to him by the White Snake Sage, imbued with the power of the Dragon Cave. This scale, though small, allowed Raza to feel the surging natural energy within it. Without hesitation, Raza raised his right hand and pointed the comma at the white scale. In an instant, the natural power within the scale was drawn toward the comma by its immense pulling force. The surging natural energy transformed into a massive white serpent and flew into the comma. As this natural energy from the White Snake Sage fused with Raza's body through the power of comma, Raza immediately felt a new strength slowly emerging in his heart. At the same time, he realized that his sensory ability was rapidly expanding, stretching out further and further, its range growing wider. So, this is the spatial ability the White Snake Sage spoke of? At this moment, Raza's weakest sensory ability was quickly replenished. His sensory range, initially just 1 kilometer, began to expand rapidly, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers. What was even more terrifying was that he wasn't just improving his range, the details within the range, every blade of grass, every tree, became increasingly clear. The closer the object, the more distinct the sensation. With his eyes closed, Raza slowly acclimated to this newly acquired ability. After about half an hour, he slowly opened his eyes. At that moment, his sensory ability surpassed even the strongest sensory abilities of the Uzumaki clan, such as the Kagura Mind's Eye. Within a 10-kilometer radius centered on him, he could clearly sense everything, including chakra, natural energy, and senjutsu energy. He could detect the precise location of others, the size of their energy, and even the chakra attributes. Beyond the 10-kilometer range, while not as clear, he could still vaguely sense the direction of others. This range extended up to around 100 kilometers. This range was measured from his position. If considered from Raza's perspective, it spanned a direct 200 kilometers. However, Raza was still not fully satisfied. He clearly remembered that in the later stages of the Hokage story, for example, both Hashirama and Tobirama, while in the Uzumaki village, could sense Madara from the battlefield, and that distance was at least over 1,000 kilometers. Of course, for Raza at present, the most important aspect of this ability was that it would prevent Black Zetsu and White Zetsu from spying on him. At that moment, Raza sensed something and vanished with a body flicker technique. When he reappeared, he was already inside Chiyo's laboratory in the Dragon Oasis. What's this? As Raza infused senjutsu energy into several test subjects from Iwabikure, 6 white Zetsu bodies emerged from the experiments. Seeing Raza, who had extracted them, the white Zetsu were filled with fear. How is this possible? I see, the spore technique? What a shame, these aren't the top-tier Zetsu like the ones Akatsuki has. However, such valuable research material couldn't be wasted. Raza didn't give them any time to react. He immediately sealed them using magnet release and stored them in a scroll. As for the appearance of white Zetsu, Raza wasn't too surprised. In fact, it would have been strange if they hadn't shown up. Given his current strength and Madara's weakened state, Raza wasn't worried at all. It was Black Zetsu that truly concerned him. After dealing with White Zetsu, Raza returned beneath the God Tree. Though the newly acquired spatial power pleased him, Raza wasn't entirely confident about using it directly to practice the Dragon Cave's secret transformation technique. He still wanted to add an extra layer of precaution. With that thought, he didn't hesitate anymore. He placed both of his hands on the trunk of the God Tree. The God Tree seemed to sense his intentions, and a pull came, drawing all the power Raza had just gained into his body. Soon, a brand new fruit appeared on the tree's canopy. Seeing this, Raza nodded in satisfaction. At the same time, he recalled the words the White Snake Sage had told him. Any normal person would likely dislike living under constant surveillance. Once this war ended, perhaps he could begin attempting to help those around him abandon chakra as a source of power. With this thought in mind, Raza wasted no time and picked the new fruit from the tree, eating it. The moment he consumed it, Raza, who hadn't expected much, suddenly felt a strange shift within his body. He could clearly sense what was happening. It was a power he had never used before, a gift from the priestesses of the Land of Demons, known as the power of foresight. Chapter 177, The Evolution of Kama. In the Land of Demons, during the battle with Morio, Raza's gains were immense. Aside from gaining control of a space the size of Sunagakure from Morio, he also obtained the ability to create puppet bugs and possess and control puppets. But his gains didn't stop there. Let's not forget that during that battle, Raza also received a gift from the priestesses of the Land of Demons. The ability they bestowed upon him was simple, foresight. This might sound like a powerful ability, and it certainly was, but it came with a restriction. Currently, Raza could only use this foresight ability to see his own death. Yes, it wasn't about seeing danger. It was about seeing his own death. And it only applied to him. At first glance, this seemed like a rather useless ability. Because as soon as he sensed that a life-threatening danger was approaching, he wouldn't even know if he could do anything to avoid it. Furthermore, if there was no life-threatening danger, the ability was effectively useless. Fortunately, Raza soon discovered an alternative use for this ability. As long as the foresight ability didn't activate, it meant that whatever he was doing at the time posed no immediate threat to his life. This was why Raza had no hesitation in confronting the Four Tails and Five Tails. After all, in the current shinobi world, only a handful of people could bring Raza to the brink of death. In fact, the only ones he truly feared were Black Zetsu, the Sage of the Six Paths, and the Otsutsuki clan. So now, if he could act against the two-tailed beasts without triggering the foresight ability, it suggested that his actions hadn't provoked a strong reaction from those powerful figures. But now, Raza felt an unusual disturbance in his foresight ability, not a warning of danger, but a strange sensation. Quickly, Raza traced this anomaly to its source. It came from Morio's space. When Raza arrived, the scene before him made his eyes widen. What was once a lifeless world the size of Sunagakure, Morio's Yellow Spring world, was now undergoing a strange transformation. This change was truly peculiar. Nothing seemed to be happening to the naked eye, but Raza could perceive it only through his sensory abilities. The Senjutsu energy, which had once floated faintly like mist in this world, was now fusing. Yes, fusing? The Senjutsu energy was merging within Morio's space, and the result was that Morio's world was slowly expanding. At the same time, Raza could feel the once stagnant world begin to exhibit signs of movement, not the movement of Senjutsu energy, but rather a flow akin to time itself. Time! Suddenly, Raza had an epiphany. The priestesses wield the power of foresight over time. The White Snake Sage's scales possess spatial power. And now, Morio had created this space. These three forces were converging at this very moment, fusing together as though forming a pivotal moment, a new form of power. Ultimately, these forces merged into the power of temporal space. This was the power of creation. Excited by this possibility, Raza couldn't contain his exhilaration. Without hesitation, Raza began absorbing the Senjutsu energy from the outside world at an overwhelming pace. Indeed, as more and more Senjutsu energy flowed in, the changes within Morio's world accelerated. However, soon, Raza began to feel dissatisfied. Too slow, it's too slow. Although the world was indeed changing, the transformation was just too subtle. Raza understood this. Just like how he absorbed Senjutsu energy, although all the energy in this world had been purified by him so far, he wasn't the true owner of this Senjutsu energy. This energy naturally belonged to this world. While he had a unique connection with it, there was still a limit to how quickly he could absorb it. And clearly, the more Senjutsu energy he purified, the faster his absorption rate became. In other words, should he take action against the tailed beasts? This thought left Raza in an awkward situation. If he didn't act against the tailed beasts, his power would hit a bottleneck. But if he did, it could lead to trouble. What should I do? Upon careful reflection, the only major sources of chakra or natural energy that he knew of were the three great sage lands, as well as the so-called Zero Tail from Kunin Village and the Six Paths ninja tools from the Land of Grass, the box of ultimate bliss. But wait, there was also the Otsutsuki clan on the moon. But out of these, aside from Zero Tail, he couldn't directly intervene with the others. And as for Zero Tail, he still needed Kunin Village's people to work for him. After much thought, Raza decided to wait a little longer. Some things couldn't be rushed. With this in mind, he suppressed his impatience and turned his attention to something else. Since Morio's space had undergone such a change, what about the Senjutsu energy sealed in the gourd? Raza immediately shifted his consciousness to the sealed space within the gourd. What he saw next filled him with excitement. Though there was no visible change at the center of the space, where the spiral-like energy formation for the secret dragon transformation technique resided, through his sensory abilities, Raza could feel that this Senjutsu energy seemed to have gained some new power. What's this? However, to understand the nature of this power, he would need to use it. With that thought, he didn't waste any time. He withdrew his consciousness from the gourd's sealed space and returned to Morio's realm. Making hand seals, he unlocked the seal on his chest, releasing the Senjutsu energy from the gourd. The energy flowed from Raza's chest to his limbs and throughout his body. Just as Raza didn't feel anything unusual at first, he suddenly felt a familiar change in his right hand. It was, The last time he felt this kind of reaction was when he absorbed the chakra from the Senju cells in Danzo's arm. He opened his eyes and looked at his right hand. There, from one corner of the diamond-shaped, a black line extended outward, eventually forming a black dot just below the base of his thumb. And at the moment the dot appeared, Raza felt a strange sensation. This feeling wasn't new to him. It was a sensation he only experienced when someone used reverse summoning techniques to summon him. But in this ninja world, the only entity capable of summoning him through reverse summoning was the contract with the Ryuchi cave. Yet this sensation was different. It wasn't just the natural energy of the Ryuchi cave, it also contained a strange, malevolent chakra. What's going on? Raza certainly didn't want to accept this inexplicable summoning. But his foresight ability didn't warn him of any danger, and this strange summoning seemed tied to his cheat. Curious about who might be summoning him, he ultimately decided not to refuse it. Boom! With a puff of white smoke, Raza disappeared from his original location. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a dark, cramped space, feeling as though he had lost control of his body. The sound of kunai clanging against each other echoed from outside. What's going on? Although he didn't understand the situation, Raza disliked this sense of being restrained and immediately prepared to break free from this space. However, just as he was about to take action, he realized that the senjutsu energy inside him had vanished, replaced by a somewhat unfamiliar chakra. Chapter 178, The 64th Year of Konoha. In the 64th year of Konoha, in conjunction with Sunagakure, is hosting the Chunin exams. After a morning full of exciting battles, the Chunin exams have finally reached the highly anticipated crucial match. This is the match between Sasuke Uchiha, the orphan of the Uchiha clan from Konoha, and Gaara, the son of the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure. The match has drawn attention from guests who have traveled from afar to watch. The thrilling ninja battle has the audience cheering non-stop. However, just as the match is about to reach its conclusion, an unexpected change occurs. First, a large-scale jinjutsu falls from the sky, causing the vast majority of the spectators to fall into a deep sleep. Then, Sunagakure's originally allies, ninjas, suddenly turn against their comrades. Finally, from the observation tower, the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure suddenly makes a move against the Third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and takes him hostage. Hiruzen Sarutobi quickly realizes the reason behind Sunagakure's betrayal. The man who was supposed to be the Kazekage of Sunagakure throws away his hat and tears off his mask, revealing the face of his most beloved disciple, Orochimaru, or rogue ninja of Konoha, one of the legendary Sannin. After the four sound ninjas, disguised as Kazekage guards, cast the four purple flames formation, giving Orochimaru and the Third Hokage a battlefield free from interference, Orochimaru finally reveals his true objective, Sasuke Uchiha. Hiruzen Sarutobi naturally refuses to comply with Orochimaru's wishes. After a brief exchange of blows, Orochimaru finally performs the jutsu he had prepared to kill his former sensei. Summoning Jutsu, Edo Tensei. What? Looking at the three coffins rising from the ground, each labeled with the characters for first, second, and fourth, Hiruzen Sarutobi immediately forms hand seals, trying to stop Orochimaru. But the coffins of the first and second Hokages have already been summoned. Hiruzen Sarutobi can only do his best to prevent the coffin labeled fourth from being summoned. Just as Hiruzen Sarutobi is about to succeed, the coffin marked fourth halts halfway, as if it is about to return to where it came from. Did it succeed? Before Hiruzen Sarutobi can rejoice, he notices that the third coffin, which seemed to fail to be summoned, has risen again, now positioned at the front. Did it still fail? At this moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi's expression darkens. Behind the coffin, Orochimaru licks his lips, wearing a triumphant smile. Having the Hokage die at the hands of a Hokage is simply too amusing. At that moment, the lids of the three coffins slowly open and fall heavily to the ground, revealing the figures of 3 powerful ninja. Could it be, those two are? Who are they? Those are the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and the second Hokage, Tobarama Senju, who established our Konoha village. What? Then who is the third one? That is actually the fourth Kazekage of Sunigakure. Orochimaru actually killed the fourth Kazekage of Sunigakure. In that instant, as Hiruzen Sarutobi gazes at the figures stepping out of the coffins. First Hokage Hashirama Senju, second Hokage Senju Tobarama, and the fourth Kazekage of Sunigakure, Raza, he finally understands the full scope of what has transpired. Hiruzen Sarutobi, of course, did not believe that the third coffin labeled 4 contained the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, as his soul was still in the belly of the death god. And on such an important stage, Orochimaru would not be so unprepared, not even knowing whether he could use the reincarnation of the Edo Tensei to bring back the fourth Hokage. At this moment, the first and second Hokages, summoned by the Edo Tensei, regained their awareness. Feeling their bodies, they looked back at Orochimaru and understood what had happened. I see, so this is the Edo Tensei. Using this forbidden jutsu to summon us. What an impressive young man. The second Hokage said, his voice familiar to Hiruzen Sarutobi. The first Hokage also spoke with some helplessness. As expected, no matter which world, war always exists. Hiruzen Sarutobi's face darkened as he angrily shouted at Orochimaru. Orochimaru, you got some nerve to toy with the souls of the dead? This is unforgivable. Sensei, and Lord First Hokage, I never imagined I would meet you both under these circumstances. Senju Tobarama, hearing the familiar voice, looked over. Hiruzen, is that you? Have you gotten so old? Oh, Sarutobi, it's been a long time, the first Hokage responded warmly. Orochimaru, however, licked his lips, eagerly pulling out 2 kunai sealed with a jutsu and driving them into the heads of the 2 Hokages, completely controlling them. Stop chatting, you old fools. Start fighting already. The 2 Hokages immediately began to lose consciousness, leaving behind only one last sentence. Sorry, Hiruzen. Hiruzen Sarutobi immediately became alert. At that moment, Orochimaru drew another kunai, preparing to control the fourth Kazekage, who was standing in the front. It was understandable that the spectators overlooked the Kazekage, as the fourth Kazekage, summoned through the Edo Tensei, seemed insignificant compared to the 3 Hokages and their complicated sensei-student relationship. In Orochimaru's view, this newly created fourth Kazekage reincarnation seemed weak compared to the 2 Hokages, with no sign of regained consciousness. But something unexpected happened just as Orochimaru approached the Kazekage, preparing to use the special kunai to control him. The fourth Kazekage suddenly moved on his own, starting to form hand seals. Edo Tensei. Release! Before Orochimaru could react, countless grains of sand erupted from beneath the Kazekage's feet, transforming into blades that sliced Orochimaru in half at the waist. What? In that instant, Orochimaru's pupils contracted, his eyes filled with disbelief. He clearly sensed that the fourth Kazekage, whom he had killed and turned into a puppet, had broken free of his control. This shocking sight caused not only Orochimaru but also Hiruzen Sarutobi and the surrounding Sound Ninja and Konoha Umbu to react in alarm. Orochimaru-sama. What is this? Though the attack could not harm Orochimaru, he was quickly sliced in half. However, countless small snakes burst from his body and entangled together, reuniting his 2 halves. Still, the unexpected turn of events caused Orochimaru to be cautious and retreat. Fortunately, the sand did not pursue him. Once at a safe distance, Orochimaru frowned as he watched the fourth Kazekage standing there, seemingly feeling his new body. Confusion was etched across his face. What's going on? This sudden change made the atmosphere inside the barrier grow increasingly strange. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the fourth Kazekage, who had suddenly risen up. As the silence grew tense, the Kazekage finally looked up, his eyes scanning the surroundings before settling on Orochimaru. Edo Tensei, huh? Interesting. To everyone's further shock, the Kazekage then reached out and grabbed the head of the first Hokage. What? Orochimaru immediately felt a bad premonition and tried to control the first Hokage to retreat, but he found that he could no longer control him. Then, he witnessed something even more astonishing. With the naked eye, it seemed as though the first Hokage's soul was leaving his body, transforming into strands of chakra, which the fourth Kazekage, now reanimated, was continuously absorbing. Though Orochimaru still did not understand what was happening, he quickly reacted. Water style. Water break. Chapter 179, The Future World. The second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, instantly performed a water-style jutsu, spitting out a high-pressure water stream aimed at the Kazekage, who was absorbing the first Hokage's chakra. Although it was regrettable, Raza, the fourth Kazekage, released the first Hokage's soul and quickly retreated. The first Hokage's soul then flew back into the Edo Tensei body. Seeing this, Orochimaru immediately summoned the two Hokage's reincarnations to his side. However, he still didn't let his guard down, warily watching the suddenly uncontrollable reincarnation of the Kazekage. This is too strange, Orochimaru muttered to himself. As the caster of the Edo Tensei, Orochimaru knew that as long as the correct hand signs were known, the summoner of the jutsu could undo the summoning contract and regain control. That was why he was so eager to control the first and second Hokages. But why did this Kazekage from Sunagakure know the hand sign? Moreover, Orochimaru was sure that the ability to absorb chakra just displayed by this Kazekage was not something he originally possessed, otherwise, it should have appeared during the previous battle. At this moment, everyone's hearts were filled with confusion. However, not far away, Hiruzen Sarutobi seemed to see an opportunity and immediately shouted, "Kazekage, I'm the Hokage. It seems that you two were killed by Orochimaru. Now, Sunagakure is under Orochimaru's control and is attacking Konoha. We must work together to defeat Orochimaru and save both our villages." The words from Hiruzen Sarutobi brightened the Umbu's faces around him. Indeed, if the two Kage teamed up, even though Orochimaru controlled two Hokages, they would still be able to put up a fight. However, Orochimaru said nothing, only frowning as he observed the Kazekage, who was still seemingly enjoying his new body. Hiruzen Sarutobi thought that the Kazekage had just been summoned and had not yet fully regained his senses. He was about to call out again when the Kazekage finally lowered his hands, turned, and glanced outside the barrier before coldly saying, "No. I refuse. This is a matter for your Konoha." With that, Raza calmly walked up to the barrier of the four purple flames formation. To everyone's astonishment, he formed hand seals. For purple flames formation. Release. Suddenly, a small gate opened in the four purple flames formation, and Raza, the Kazekage, walked out, causing the barrier to close again. This scene left everyone, including Orochimaru, stunned and confused. Not only did he know how to break the Edo Tensei, but he also knew how to bypass the four purple flames formation. At this moment, Raza paid no mind to them. Walking out of the barrier, Raza looked around at the unfamiliar yet familiar arena, filled with figures that should have appeared only many years later. He couldn't help but sigh, glancing at the kama in his hand. "I see. So this is the power of time and space? It brought me to the future." No. As he gazed at the scene before him, identical to the one from the story, Raza understood. This was not the future, but the second world of the Hokage. Interesting, so does this mean I can do whatever I want in this world? After all, if anything goes wrong, I can just undo the Edo Tensei and return to my own world. No matter how powerful, even the Sage of the Six Paths can't intervene in parallel worlds, right? However, before doing anything, there were two things he had to take care of. He had sensed earlier that although he had arrived in a parallel world through the power of time and space, he could still sense the existence of the Hell World and the Gourd Seal Space, both of which shared the same temporal and spatial powers. However, due to his current Edo Tensei body, which couldn't use Sage Mode energy, he was unable to open these two spaces. At present, just like when he first arrived in this world, he could only use chakra. In other words, he needed to regain his Sage Mode energy. Fortunately, with the experience from his previous world, he knew exactly what to do this time. All he had to do was plant a God tree again and replace the chakra in his body, and it would be done. The only issue was whether or not his Edo Tensei body could manage that. But since the karma still existed, there shouldn't be any problem. Originally, he planned to directly take action against his son in this world, Gaara, or the Nine-Tails chakra, but first, both seemed to have left Konoha, and second, even though he had just absorbed some of Hashirama's chakra, he hadn't fully regained his would-release powers due to his weakened state. However, he was able to sense something, and with the additional sensory abilities granted by the time-space power, he turned his gaze toward a direction in Konoha. That immense chakra, even larger than a tailed beast's, should belong to Hashirama's body. Using Hashirama's power as the seed for his new god tree would be the perfect choice. As for the other matter, in the arena for the finals, after handing over Gaara to Temari and Kankuro, Baki, the head of the Umbu, remained behind to carry out the Kazekage's Konoha destruction plan and fought against the Jonin, Yugao, who had stayed behind. He noticed the barrier that had appeared on the spectators' platform in the distance. However, not knowing the exact situation inside, he assumed that his Kazekage was fighting the Hokage. Since the Kazekage was fighting against Konoha's Hokage, he, as the Umbu leader, couldn't back down either. He immediately joined the battle with the Konoha Jonin, and the two engaged in a fierce fight. At that moment, suddenly, a wave of golden sand surged in, separating the two. Boom! The force of the golden sand startled both of them, and they looked up to see a familiar figure standing at the center. Kazekage-sama. Baki was surprised but quickly noticed the Kazekage's strange appearance. Yugao was also startled when she saw the Kazekage from Sunagakure, the terrifying aura making her break into a cold sweat. But if the Kazekage was here, then who was fighting against the Hokage on the spectators' platform? Raza, however, paid no attention to the Konoha ninja standing nearby. He immediately gave orders to Baki. Baki, immediately relay my orders. Our alliance with Orochimaru has ended. Sunagakure's ninja must leave Konoha and return to the village. Although this was a parallel world, since he had come here, he certainly wouldn't ignore Sunagakure. Baki, though startled, immediately nodded in agreement and vanished from the spot. Raza, seeing this, ignored Yugao and dissolved into sand, vanishing from the scene. In Konoha, at the Root headquarters. Although the outside world was in turmoil, the leader of Root, Danzo, remained seated, waiting calmly. Even the Root ninjas hadn't been dispatched. Why had Orochimaru been able to invade Konoha so easily? Danzo's cooperation had played a significant role in that. Once Hiruzen Sarutobi died, Konoha would be without leadership, and he would naturally be able to take the position of Hokage. But just as everything seemed to be going according to plan, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the Root base. What's going on? Danzo furrowed his brows. A Root ninja rushed up to report. Bad news, Danzo-sama, the Root base is under attack. Who dares to be so reckless? It's Sunagakure's Fourth Kazekage. What? Chapter 180, Hashirama's Corpse. When Danzo stepped out of his residence and arrived at the Root base outside, he saw waves of golden sand surging towards the base like an ocean. All the Root ninjas in the organization were engulfed by the sand. As expected, only the Fourth Kazekage from Sunagakure could control such golden sand. But, wait a minute, what was going on? Hadn't Orochimaru said that he had killed the Fourth Kazekage? And why was he invading the Root base? Danzo couldn't make sense of it at all. Just then, a ninja wearing a black mask descended from the sky. He was one of Danzo's trusted subordinates, a member of the Yamanaka clan, Fuyamanaka. What's going on? Why is the Fourth Kazekage here? Danzo asked coldly, and Fu knelt on the ground and answered. Danzo-sama, according to the latest intelligence, Orochimaru used the Edo Tensei technique to summon the first and second Hokage, as well as the Fourth Kazekage from Sunagakure. However, the technique went awry, and the Fourth Kazekage broke free from Orochimaru's control and escaped from the barrier. Danzo was startled, then narrowed his eyes, looking at the root base, now covered in sand. He spoke in a low tone. "Edo Tensei, a forbidden technique from my master?" "Orochimaru." "But the Fourth Kazekage actually managed to break free. How did he do that?" "No, that's not important. Where's the wind? Why hasn't he arrived yet?" As soon as he finished speaking, another figure appeared, a person with orange hair, wearing a Konoha headband and carrying a short sword on his back. He was another of Danzo's trusted subordinates, a sensory ninja from the Yamanaka clan, Yamanaka Kaze. "Have you found the Kazekage's trail?" Danzo asked. He asked this because Yamanaka Kaze was one of the few sensory ninjas en route. Unfortunately, Yamanaka Kaze shook his head and knelt on the ground. "Sorry, Danzo-sama. The sand is filled with massive chakra, interfering with my sensory abilities." Danzo's expression grew darker. "I see. Looks like this Kazekage was well prepared. But why doesn't he go after Orochimaru for revenge? Why come to our root base?" This question also confused the nearby root members. "Go, find the Kazekage. Also, bring along the sealing squad members. He's in a reanimated body, and ordinary techniques won't be able to destroy him. Only sealing jutsu will work." "Yes, sir." Root ninjas immediately scattered, searching for Raza's whereabouts within the base. Meanwhile, Raza had already arrived at his destination. The vast amounts of sand pouring into the root base allowed Raza to fully understand the internal structure of the root organization. With his current sensory abilities and the ability to move through the sand, he quickly located his target. It was a massive cave hidden beneath the root base. A giant stone blocked the path ahead, covered in various sealing jutsu. Raza was very familiar with these sealing techniques. They were all from the Uzumaki clan. It seemed that after Hashirama's death, his wife, Uzumaki Mito, had personally laid these seals. From these techniques, it was clear that Uzumaki Mito's talent in sealing was far superior to that of Tsunade. Unfortunately, Raza did not have the time to study these sealing techniques. With limited time, he decided to forcefully break through them. Without hesitation, he formed a series of hand seals. Though it had been over a year since he last used ninjutsu, he still executed the seals with ease. Suddenly, four sand clones emerged beside him. "You guard the surroundings." After giving the command, Raza approached the massive stone and pressed his right hand against the seals. In an instant, the enormous pulling force of the Kama absorbed the seals from the stone. After a brief moment, the stone began to rumble and slowly shifted aside. When Raza entered, he found a vast cave inside. Sunlight streamed down from above, casting light onto a massive tree below. The tree's trunk was so large it seemed to have lived for over 1,000 years, about the width of 10 people embracing it. Its canopy resembled a giant green umbrella, covering everything around it. At the base of the tree, a small shrine stood. Despite having been dead for decades, the body of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, still lay there, lifelike as ever. Upon closer inspection, Raza noticed that Hashirama's body seemed to merge with the tree itself. Even though Hashirama had died many years ago, the chakra emanating from his body was still overwhelming. It was far stronger than the chakra of any tailed beast. The familiar sensation confirmed Raza's suspicions. As expected, Hashirama Senju's power isn't just ordinary wood release. It's the power of the God Tree, or rather, the power of the 10 Tails. One could say that Hashirama Senju is the living 10 Tails. However, all of this now belonged to Raza. In Konoha. At the Chunin exams venue. Raza's unexpected appearance caused Orochimaru much confusion and curiosity, but it didn't affect his primary goal. This time, his only target was to kill his dear teacher, the third Hokage. However, the sudden retreat of Tsunagekyu's forces had a significant impact on the ongoing battles in Konoha. While Konoha had been devastated, it was still far from a village that Tsunagekure or Otogekyure could easily attack. Not to mention, Sunagakure itself was in a weakened state. Once Sunagakure's ninjas withdrew from the battlefield, Otogakure's ninjas were left on their own and couldn't handle the Konoha ninjas. Additionally, the legendary Sannin member Jiraiya had secretly intervened. After the initial confusion, Konoha's ninjas quickly regained control of the internal situation. At the exam arena, Kakashi, Naruto, and the others' teacher used his Sharingan to observe everything. Seeing the order given by the Kazekage for Sunagakure's ninja to retreat, although somewhat confused, Kakashi felt relieved. Only the single-minded guy did not understand what was happening. After kicking an Otogakure ninja away, he rushed over to Kakashi, anxiously asking, "Kakashi, what happened? Why did Sunagakure's ninjas suddenly retreat?" Kakashi, whose Sharingan was focused on the battle inside the barrier, calmly replied, "It was the Kazekage of Sunagakure who gave the order. They'd ended their alliance with Orochimaru and retreated." "That's great!" Guy sighed in relief, but quickly realized something and looked toward the barrier. If the Kazekage retreated, then who's fighting the third Hokage? Kakashi's face darkened as he said the name, which made Guy's expression change dramatically. Orochimaru. What? At that moment, Naruto, Sakura, and Shikamaru, who had just awakened from the Jinjutsu, came over to Kakashi and Guy's side. "Kakashi-sensei." "Guy-sensei." "What's going on?" Facing the confused expressions of the others, Kakashi simply said, "It's fine now. Sunagakure's ninjas have retreated, and Otogakure is not a concern. Now, we'll just have to watch the battle of the Hokage." However, as Kakashi spoke, he noticed something was off when he looked at the kids in front of him. After a second look, he became anxious and asked, "Where's Sasuke?" As soon as he said that, Naruto and Sakura immediately realized Sasuke was no longer with them. At that moment, Yamato appeared in front of the group with a troubled look on his face. "Sorry, Kakashi-senpai, I sent Sasuke to pursue Sunagakure's Gaara and the others." Chapter 181, Grabbing and Snatching. Yamato was starting to regret it. Just a short while ago, Sunagakure had suddenly launched a violent uprising, and the Chunin exams were halted. Faced with the menacing Sunagakure Jonin Baki, Yamato couldn't spare the attention, so he had no choice but to let the other participant of the match, Sasuke Uchiha, go after Gaara and the others who had fled. In Yamato's eyes, Sasuke Uchiha's performance in the exam already demonstrated the level of a Chunin, an outstanding one at that. But things changed far too quickly. Hearing Yamato's words, Kakashi's expression also changed drastically. Still, there was no time to waste. He immediately issued an order. "Yamato, please inform the village and have them send reinforcements. Guy, you and I will go after Sasuke." "Understood, Kakashi-senpai." Yamato's figure vanished in an instant. Watching Kakashi and Guy about to leave, Naruto and Sakura, standing nearby, immediately shouted in worry. "Wait, Kakashi-sensei. We're going too!" This made Shikamaru, who was standing beside them, feel a bit awkward. He knew this was dangerous, and reason told him not to go, but if he said nothing now, it would seem disloyal. "Count me in too." Kakashi naturally wanted to refuse. Sending 3 kids into something this dangerous was complete nonsense. But seeing Naruto's determined eyes, and recalling how he had performed in this Chunin exam, Kakashi finally nodded. "You can come, but from now on, you must follow Shikamaru's command in everything." Kakashi was also worried that he might not be able to protect Naruto and Sakura in the midst of battle. Thankfully, Shikamaru was with them. Shikamaru, though a bit speechless, could only mutter what a drag and follow after them. Outside Konohagakure. The Sunagakure shinobi who had been lying in wait outside the gates to invade Konoha had just engaged the Konoha shinobi. That was when Baki appeared, bringing with him the Kazekage's order. All Sunagakure shinobi were to withdraw from battle. Though the Sunagakure shinobi were confused, after all, they had spent so long preparing, now the mission was suddenly cancelled. Still, they obeyed Baki and swiftly retreated. Before long, Baki caught up with the earlier withdrawing Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara. Baki-sensei. The three were visibly relieved to see him. Baki quickly approached and nodded. But when his gaze fell upon Gaara, who was clutching his head in pain, his expression changed drastically. He had already sensed that the tailed beast inside Gaara was on the verge of going berserk. At that moment, a Sunigakure shinobi came forward and said, "Captain, a Konoha shinobi is secretly following us. It's Sasuke Uchiha." At that moment, a trace of greed flickered in Baki's heart, but Gaara's pained wails immediately snapped him back to reality. "No, we have to return to the village immediately. Sasuke Uchiha won't be alone. We cannot risk losing Shikaku." "Hi!" The shinobi all understood the severity of a tailed beast going out of control. To be honest, they weren't that concerned about Gaara's life. They were more worried that if the tailed beast went on a rampage here, with no one to control it, Sunigakure would lose Shikaku. So, under the cover of their fellow Sunigakure shinobi, Gaara and the others headed toward the Land of Wind. Among the group, Temari glanced at her younger brother Gaara, slung over Kankuro's shoulder and clearly in pain, then at the village shinobi who had abruptly withdrawn. Unable to hold back her confusion, she asked her teacher, "Sensei, what's going on? Why the sudden?" Baki's answer was simple. "This is the Kazekage-sama's order. As for the details, we'll wait for Kazekage-sama to return and explain." But though he said that, Baki couldn't help but feel uneasy as he recalled the Kazekage's condition when he last saw him. "Father." Baki's words caused both Temari and Kankuro to freeze for a moment, and then they fell silent. Though by blood they were father and children, aside from a few good memories from childhood, their relationship had long since become more like that of superior and subordinates. Konoha. Root Division. Time passed slowly. Despite all efforts from the Root Shinobi, they still couldn't locate the whereabouts of the Fourth Kazekage. "Useless. You can't even handle something this simple." Danzo's expression was dark. Beside him, Fuyamanaka cautiously offered a suggestion. "Danzo-sama, could the Kazekage have already left?" "Left? The gold dust is still beneath our feet. How could that Kazekage possibly have left?" Saying that, Danzo fell into thought, his eyes scanning every corner of the root base. What exactly is his goal? Fuyamanaka was also lost in thought. But even the sensor bugs from Torian can't detect him? Where could that Kazekage be hiding? The entire root base is under the surveillance of those bugs. Danzo suddenly trembled, his pupils shrinking as he moved at once. He had just remembered that there was only one place in the entire root base that even Torian sensor bugs couldn't reach. That place was so secret that even trusted aides like Fuyamanaka and Aburane Torian had no knowledge of it. In just a few moments, Danzo arrived at the destination. The moment he saw the undone sealing array, his expression turned grim. How did the Kazekage from Sunigakure know about this place? Was it Orochimaru? But even if that were the case, how did he break the seal placed here? While Danzo was deep in thought, Fuyamanaka, who had come to this place for the first time, asked in shock. "Danzo-sama, what is this place?" Danzo didn't hide the truth as he would need Fuyamanaka's help next. The second Hokage and Mito-sama constructed this place to seal the first Hokage's corpse. It was also the foundation of Root itself. There was no time to care about Fuyamanaka's shock. Danzo immediately asked. "The seal's been broken, which means that Kazekage is most likely inside. Use your sensory ability to check." "Hi!" Fuyamanaka immediately closed his eyes and concentrated. After a moment, his brows furrowed. Eventually, he opened his eyes and reported. "Reporting to Danzo-sama, I can't sense anything." Danzo was stunned. "Nothing at all? What about chakra?" "Nothing. Perhaps the Fourth Kazekage has some special ability that blocks detection?" Danzo grew increasingly uneasy. He didn't care whether the Fourth Kazekage could block sensory detection. However, even if Fuyamanaka couldn't sense the Kazekage's chakra, he could still feel the massive chakra from the first Hokage's corpse inside. With that in mind, Danzo didn't hesitate any longer. Be alert. We're going in. Yes. But the moment Danzo stepped into the massive cavern, what he saw made his pupils contract. Because the cavern was completely empty. Danzo even rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Where's that massive tree? And then, at that moment, a voice rang out. Ninja Art for Violet Flames Formation. Chapter 182, The Sage of Six Paths. 10 odd minutes later. Inside the Four Violet Flames formation, the place was a wreck, with evidence of intense battle everywhere. Massive trees twisted and sprawled, while golden sand floated through the air. Raza, in his Edo Tensei form, stood atop the floating gold dust. Beneath his feet, hanging from the gnarled branches of a tree, were two utterly broken corpses. Even in death, Danzo's remaining left eye was filled with deep unwillingness. It wasn't just the frustration of dying so abruptly and inexplicably, but also the shock of seeing Raza wield would release. But Raza only glanced at him briefly before losing interest. He had to admit, maybe it was the age, but this era's Danzo really was weak. In his original timeline, defeating Danzo required careful planning, leveraging asymmetrical intelligence, and launching a surprise attack to secure victory. But this Danzo, Raza had eliminated him completely in under 10 minutes. Perhaps the years of power and comfort had dulled Danzo's vigilance to an extreme. The moment Raza launched his sneak attack, he severed Danzo's right arm and stole the three-tomo Sharingan from his right eye, giving him no chance to use his Anaji. The battle ended soon after with would release. As for the Yamanaka clan shinobi, he had been utterly consumed like an ant within the sea of trees. However, even though his objective had been achieved, Raza had no intention of leaving yet. He had something to confirm. Even though this Edo Tensei body was unable to utilize Senjutsu chakra and thus couldn't access the Yomi world, he possessed an alternative approach. Summoning technique, Gate of Yomi. With the summoning complete, a massive stone gate rose from the ground. Seeing the gate appear, Raza grinned in satisfaction. Success. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped through. Before him stretched a familiar scene, a vast, empty, white world that seemed even larger than the last time he came. However, due to his current inability to access Senjutsu chakra, he couldn't sense the natural energy of this realm. Fortunately, that wouldn't be a problem for long. He was about to regain his Senjutsu chakra. However, before that, there was still one answer he needed. This answer was not hard to find. Just a few minutes later, he arrived at a familiar location, the very center of this Yomi world. There, Raza immediately saw what he was looking for. Seated cross-legged in complete stillness was another Raza, identical in appearance. But this Raza had his eyes shut tightly, showing no sign of life, like a soulless corpse. At that moment, there were two Razas in the Yomi world. One was the Raza reincarnated through Edo Tensei. The other was the Raza of Senjutsu chakra. Observing this scene, Raza finally understood. So, the Edo Tensei merely summoned my soul into the future. Inexplicably, a theory began to form in his mind. So that means, after I replaced the original Fourth Kazekage Raza of this world, I became a unique existence in time and space. The soul that Orochimaru intended to summon with Edo Tensei had already vanished, replaced by me instead. That's why I was summoned into the future? Raza grinned. How fascinating. Raza thought of something else. In the original future plot, the Fourth Kazekage would be summoned twice more, once by Kabuto during the Fourth Great Ninja War, and once at the very end, when the Sage of Six Paths summoned the previous Kage. Now the question was whether the changes in the timeline had erased that future altogether, or, just like now, led to the creation of a parallel world. If it were the second case, that would be truly interesting. Raza was inclined to believe the second possibility. The answer was simple. He looked down at the comma on his hand. Two corners of the black diamond-shaped mark remained unchanged. But that was a matter for the future. For now, it was time to return to his body. With that thought, Raza immediately released the Edo Tensei on himself. He felt his soul lifting from his body. This was his first time seeing what his soul looked like. It wasn't his former self from his past life, but rather the current Fourth Kazekage Raza. It seemed his original soul had fully merged with this Raza. But then, all of a sudden, an ominous sensation struck, and Raza's expression shifted dramatically. It was a feeling much like a summoning technique, a force from the outside world pulling at him uncontrollably. Fortunately, the Yomi space erupted with energy, effectively countering that external force. Raza, however, showed no hesitation. He immediately returned to his original body. Then, without pause, he raised his right hand and absorbed all the Edo Tensei chakra present in the area. Only after confirming that the Yomi world was now completely devoid of chakra did he take a deep breath and speak. That immense power, was it the Sage of Six Paths? Deep within the shinobi world, in a realm accessible only to souls, known as the Pure Land, a low voice slowly echoed. That power, is that Mother's? And also, time-space power? In the distance, a man hovered cross-legged in midair. Beneath him floated black orbs. He wore a long white robe, had brown hair, 2 horns, 6 black tomo across his chest, and a red spiral mark on his back. This was the founder of Ninshu, Hashirama Otsutsuki, also known as the Sage of Six Paths. In truth, ever since Raza had arrived in this world, Hashirama had sensed something unusual. As the originator of chakra across the world, every shinobi's soul was linked through chakra and firmly under his surveillance. To prepare for the arrival of the Otsutsuki clan, foes foretold by his mother, Kaguya Otsutsuki, Hashirama had gathered all deceased shinobi souls in the Pure Land, intending to train them as a force against the impending threat. Among them, the ones that mattered most were the former Kage, the peaks of shinobi power. But then, when Orochimaru used Edo Tensei to summon the Fourth Kazekage Raza, Hashirama realized that this soul, which had just been recalled from the Pure Land, had suddenly escaped his control. So, using the chakra as a link, Hashirama began monitoring this rogue soul. From the moment it broke free of the Edo Tensei, to its absorption of Indra's reincarnation, Senju Hashirama's chakra, to its entry into that strange realm, Hashirama had been watching. Naturally, he also noticed the strange diamond-shaped mark on Raza's right palm. Chapter 183, Dual Spacetime. Although he was born of the Otsutsuki clan from Earth, Hashirama Otsutsuki was unaware of the existence of the Karma Seal, but that didn't stop him from sensing the power above, one that was strikingly similar to his mother Kaguya's. This sudden, bizarre anomaly left Hashirama Otsutsuki somewhat puzzled. Of course, he knew about the hidden hand his mother had left behind in this world, the existence of Black Zetsu. In fact, many of Black Zetsu's actions had been tacitly permitted by him. The reason was simple, to cultivate a shinobi strong enough to resist the Otsutsuki clan. While Black Zetsu was scripting the course of this world's development, wasn't Hashirama Otsutsuki doing the same? In truth, he was hiding even more deeply. That was also why he couldn't take action directly when faced with this peculiar soul. He could only operate within the rules. And now, in the face of this soul that should have perished, the only power he could currently use was Pure Land Summoning. To bind the soul of a deceased shinobi to the Pure Land. However, Hashirama Otsutsuki discovered that something within Raza's soul was constantly resisting him. It was as if a long nail had pinned Raza's soul to his body. Fortunately, at the moment Raza came into contact with Edo Tensei, the soul separation gave Hashirama an opening. But just as he attempted to continue using Pure Land Summoning to summon this strange soul, another strange force emerged. A wave of space-time power came from that unusual space, once again stopping him. Then he watched as the other party absorbed all the chakra, completely erasing any trace of their presence from his senses. What exactly happened? Could this be another backup plan left by Mother, one that even I don't know about? Although Hashirama Otsutsuki was filled with doubts, he chose to do nothing for now and opted to observe further. Compared to the script he had written for this world, Raza's appearance was merely a minor episode. He wouldn't allow a minor episode to affect the entire course of the shinobi world's development. Unless Raza did something that even he could not tolerate. In the Yomi world. After returning to his own body and absorbing all the remaining chakra from the Edo Tensei, Raza recalled that terrifying force which had nearly grabbed and dragged him away, feeling lingering fear. At this moment, he was certain, any power that's strong, he is the one. In this world, the only being present was the Sage of Six Paths. Raza hadn't anticipated that his first encounter with the Sage as a transmigrator would not be with the version from his original timeline, but rather a future version of himself. Nevertheless, this did confirm one important fact: the words of the White Snake Sage were indeed true. The combined space-time abilities of Ryochi Cave and the Yomi world could effectively obstruct the Sage of Six Paths. This indicated he now possessed an additional advantage in confronting the Sage of Six Paths. At the very least, if he couldn't win, he could retreat into this world. Ha! Letting out a long breath, Raza began thinking about what to do next. First, upon returning to his body, he had confirmed one thing. That meant from now on, he could freely travel between the two timelines and even bring others with him. He could treat the Yomi world as a transit point. There was no need to mention his original timeline. He could enter and leave as he pleased. As for this future timeline, he could use the Gate of Yomi as a portal, linking the Yomi world and the future timeline, thus allowing him unrestricted movement. Additionally, the existence of the Yomi world allowed him to maneuver between both sides and begin testing the waters with the tailed beasts. Of course, he couldn't go too far. Fortunately, Raza had no intention of killing any tailed beast, he only needed some of their chakra. By condensing chakra from the tailed beasts into chakra fruits and fusing them into his own world, once he gathered chakra from all 9 tailed beasts, perhaps he wouldn't need to fear the Sage of Six Paths anymore. Lastly, the existence of 2 timelines and 2 Sunigakure gave him new ideas. Especially considering that in this timeline, the Fourth Kazekage had long disappeared, leaving only him as the sole Kazekage. Although both versions of Sunigakure were currently weak, if they complemented each other, they could create the strongest multi-timeline Sunigakure. Thinking of this, Raza felt a slight thrill. But for now, looking at the vast empty world before him, Raza took out a scroll. Upon opening it, a pale purple chakra fruit appeared in front of him. He had condensed this new chakra fruit by absorbing the chakra from Hashirama's corpse. As long as he planted this chakra fruit in the Yomi world and sealed it with the gourd, he would essentially have an inexhaustible supply of Senjutsu energy. As Raza formed hand seals, the Senjutsu energy in the air transformed into a vast layer of sand and gravel. Under his control, the chakra fruit gently floated up and landed within the sand. In an instant, countless roots extended from the chakra fruit, burrowing deep into the gravel. The fruit then began to grow upward, forming a straight tree trunk, from which branches and leaves began to spread. In just a short time, a massive green god tree, thick enough that 2 people would be needed to encircle it, stood tall in this desolate world, bringing a splash of color to the barren landscape. And the moment this god tree emerged, Raza could clearly feel the Senjutsu energy of this world double in density, and it was still rising. At the same time, apart from the existing space-time power, a new kind of energy appeared in this world: life. Boom! A thunderous explosion rang out in the Land of Fire just over 30 kilometers outside of Kanagakur. After the massive shockwave passed and the smoke cleared, the silhouette of a giant monster appeared in the sight of all the Sunigakure and Konoha shinobi engaged in battle. At that moment, Baki's face turned grim, while Tamari and Kankuro were trembling, pale-faced. This is bad. It's out of control after all? It finally appeared. A monster. Even the Konoha shinobi encircling the Sunigakure ninja were visibly shaken. Kakashi pulled down the mask over his Sharingan, closely examining the giant beast, sweat trailing down his forehead as he muttered. It showed up after all. Hey, Kakashi, is that a tailed beast? Guy quickly moved to Kakashi's side, shielding Sasuke and Naruto. Kakashi nodded grimly. Yeah, this is my first time seeing it in person too. Sunigakure's tailed beast, the one-tailed Shikaku. Even these 2 elite jonin looked shocked, let alone the children, who were witnessing such a creature for the first time. Their pupils contracted sharply, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Sasuke recognized that look in its eyes all too well. It was the same look Gaara had when they fought. So that's it, this guy really has a monster like that inside him. Naruto, after the initial shock, revealed a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. Clutching his stomach, he said softly, "That's the monster sealed inside him, just like me." Shino Aburame, who had followed in secret, also murmured, "What a terrifying monster, even the bugs inside me are afraid." Just then, 3 figures landed beside Kakashi and the others. At the front was Shikamaru's teacher, the son of the Hokage, Asuma Sarutobi. The other 2 were Shibi Aburame, who had come looking for his son, and Yamato, who had followed after reporting back to the village, both of them seeking to make up for their prior mistakes. Seeing the enormous monster, all 3 looked grim. Asuma scratched his head and said, "Shikaku, this is gonna be a headache. If I'd known, I wouldn't have chased after them. This is trouble, Kakashi." Kakashi's expression darkened. "It's too late to say anything now. Get ready for battle, be careful, this is a tailed beast." Chapter 184, The Protagonist. Strictly speaking, the shinobi of Sunagakure should have been able to shake off the pursuing Konoha shinobi. First, Sunagakure's forces hadn't suffered significant losses because the retreat order had come in time. Second, the Konoha shinobi were still primarily focused on Orochimaru and the shinobi from Otogakure. However, Gaara's unstable factor ultimately led to Konoha's forces catching up to the Sunagakure shinobi. The reason was simple. After hearing the name Sasuke Uchiha, Gaara, whose mind had already been unsettled, lost control and entered his Jinchuriki transformation, a state that was half-tailed beast, half-human. He launched an attack on Sasuke, who had secretly been tailing them. Baki immediately realized something was wrong, but it was already too late to stop it. Once Gaara entered that state, even Baki, his teacher, was powerless to intervene. Of course, given their numbers at the time, the Sunagakure shinobi still could have taken down Sasuke Uchiha and continued fleeing. But that's when one of the Konoha 12 appeared, Shino Aburame. Though still a child, Shino was already one of the strongest among the Konoha 12 at this stage. His bugs caused significant trouble for the Sunagakure shinobi, and together with Sasuke, they managed to buy a bit of time. As for why Shino was even there, though he often seemed low profile, Shino actually took great pride in himself. During the Chunin exams, his opponent, Kankuro, chose to forfeit the match. Shino had never let that go. So, when he noticed Sasuke leaving, he immediately sent some of his bugs after him and quietly followed behind. Still, he hadn't expected things to escalate like this, 2 kids facing off against so many Sunagakure shinobi. Fortunately, the Sunagakure shinobi underestimated them a little. They managed to hold out briefly, just on the brink of death, when Shino's father's bugs arrived. Of course, it wasn't just about underestimating their opponents. Sunagakure shinobi didn't dare strike down Sasuke and Shino. Baki wasn't a fool. Though he was confused about the Kazekage-sama's sudden retreat order, he understood that the Konoha Crush plan had failed, and the Kazekage's strange condition had given Baki a sense of unease. So he didn't want to provoke Konoha too much. With the arrival of Shino's father's insects, Kakashi, Guy, Naruto, and the others soon caught up as well. And then, a full-blown battle broke out. Sunagakure's shinobi versus Konoha's Jonin. Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara face off against Shikamaru, Shino, Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura. It wasn't that Kakashi and the others had lost their minds by sending Naruto and the others to confront a Jinchuriki like Gaara. The issue was that Gaara, already in his partial transformation, had completely lost control. The only thought dominating his mind was to kill Sasuke Uchiha to prove his worth. Even with Asuma and Yamato arriving later, there were still only 5 Konoha Jonin in total. Meanwhile, the opposing Sunagakure shinobi numbered in the hundreds. Kakashi and the others were already overwhelmed trying to hold them back. Fortunately, Sasuke and Naruto's performance stunned even the seasoned Jonin. Sasuke's Chidori combined with Naruto's multi-shadow clone jutsu actually managed to suppress Gaara's Jinchuriki transformation state. Then came the current scene. Gaara, growing more and more berserk, finally lost control completely and entered his perfect form. Roar! Since you've given me such pleasure, I'll show you the true power of the Avatar of the Sand. Above the massive Shikaku, half of Gaara's body slowly rose, his voice sending chills down Naruto and Sasuke's spines. Sasuke's eyes immediately glazed over, and Naruto's body trembled. Fortunately, at that moment, Kakashi stepped forward, standing between them and said, "Alright, Sasuke, Naruto, you both did well just now, but the next fight isn't for you to be involved in." That was only natural, and Sasuke instinctively stepped back half a pace. But Naruto stepped forward one step and said, "Kakashi-sensei." What is it, Naruto?" Naruto's unusual behavior made Kakashi a little suspicious, but then he seemed to understand something and reassured him. "Don't worry, Naruto. You two take care of yourselves from here on. We're going in." "Kakashi." "What's that?" Might Guy's anxious voice rang out as he stared seriously at Shikaku. Kakashi looked and saw Gaara atop Shikaku, who had fallen into a sleep-like state. Kakashi was shocked, still unsure what was going on, but the nearby Sunigakure shinobi quickly gave him the answer. "Damn, Gaara has activated hypnotic sleep jutsu. Shikaku is about to awaken. Everyone fall back." The Sunigakure shinobi immediately abandoned their fight with the Konoha ninja and retreated, fully aware of how devastating Shikaku's power could be in this state. At that moment, the enormous Shikaku let out a sharp, piercing cry. Finally, it's out! The sheer volume of the roar made Sakura cover her ears in terror. Is this the real Shikaku? The awakened Shikaku immediately noticed the surrounding shinobi. It didn't care whether they were from Sunigakure or Konoha and instantly roared. "Excellent! The moment I wake up, I find humans I want to kill." In an instant, Shikaku slapped its belly. Wind release, vacuum bomb. Damn! A blinding white light filled everyone's vision. Earth release, multiple Earth-style wall. Boom! A massive roar and explosion thundered in every ninja's ears. Thankfully, a huge earth wall rose, protecting everyone inside, but the terrible airflow still caused Sakura to scream in fear. After a minute, the explosion stopped. Naruto, still protected by Kakashi's earth wall, opened his eyes. What they saw made their vision blur. Kakashi's earth wall was now almost completely destroyed, only barely protecting them, and the once forested area around them had become a vast wasteland. The massive destructive power of the tailed beast jutsu had wiped out all the forest within a 5-kilometer radius in front of Shikaku. Asuma furrowed his brows. This is ridiculous, so this is the power of a tailed beast? If someone got hit by that, they'd be done for. This level of destruction was beyond any human effort to resist. "Kakashi, what do we do now?" Might Guy asked, but as soon as he finished speaking, everyone noticed Kakashi looked unusual, he was panting weakly, and his exposed Sharingan explained why he was so exhausted. "Sorry, I've used a bit too much chakra." At that moment, Naruto suddenly stood up, his gaze firm as he looked at the giant Shikaku far away, forming hand seals. "Kakashi-sensei, leave this monster to me." Everyone was shocked and stunned. Though Naruto's earlier performance had exceeded all expectations, this was a tailed beast. Even the Jonin couldn't handle it. Sakura immediately shouted in frustration. "Damn it, Naruto! This isn't the time to show off." Only Sasuke looked at Naruto's determined eyes, surprised. Since they became teammates, Naruto's strength had shocked Sasuke again and again. Could it be? This isn't a joke. At this moment, Naruto's hands finished forming the seals, radiating an aura of conviction. Kakashi, seeing Naruto's hand signs, suddenly seemed to realize something, his pupils contracting sharply. Could it be that jutsu? Naruto's seals were complete. "I'm going to use the jutsu Jiraiya-sensei taught me. Summoning jutsu." Chapter 185, Supporting Role. At the moment Gaara activated the hypnotic sleep jutsu, the Sunigakure ninja, already familiar with this scene and deeply gripped by fear, began to scatter in all directions. At that moment, they simply couldn't perceive the massive monster before them as one of their own. It was merely a creature that made no distinction between friend and foe, only mass destruction. And indeed, that was the harsh reality. After the huge explosion, Gaara's sister Temari and brother Kankuro looked at the ruined forest and the terrifying monster, their minds filled with dread as memories of 6 years ago flooded back. 6 years ago, Gaara went berserk and killed their uncle, Hashirama. That was also the first time the two saw this monster in its perfect form. Since then, they could no longer see Gaara as their lovable little brother. He had become a monster representing fear, slaughter, and bloodshed. Baki-sensei, what do we do now? Without father here, no one can control Gaara. Temari anxiously looked over, but found their teacher Baki wearing a face full of excitement. Don't worry, Temari. This might actually be a good thing. A good thing! Baki's eyes looked almost manic as he stared at the gigantic Shikaku. That's right. Using Shikaku's power to wipe out these Konoha ninjas, the Uchiha orphan, the copy ninja Kakashi, and those outstanding youngsters, this is definitely beneficial for Sunigakure. Once the Kazekage arrives, we can control Gaara. Temari, however, no longer heard anything. Her teacher's madness at this moment scared her. When she looked at her brother Kankuro, she saw fear written all over his face. This made her recall the recent battle where the Konoha ninjas around their age performed brilliantly, especially the teamwork between those two called Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, which suddenly made Temari feel a bit ashamed of herself. Just then, she heard a burst of angry shouts. Looking around, it was the group of Konoha ninjas. That guy named Naruto Uzumaki seemed to have done something foolish, leaving the Konoha ninjas around him looking both amused and exasperated. That pink-haired girl was banging Naruto's head, while Naruto held a small toad and shouted something. Why? This left Temari even more baffled. In such a dangerous situation, Konoha's ninjas were still so carefree and playful. Though strange, for some reason Temari felt a bit envious. But she didn't think too much about it because Shikaku's enormous body had already begun to move. At that moment, a voice rang out from the sky. Summoning jutsu, overwhelm the vendor jutsu. Idiot, idiot, idiot. Under the gaze of everyone's anticipation, Naruto Uzumaki, living up to his reputation as the surprise top ninja, used the summoning jutsu to call forth a palm-sized toad, Gamakichi. Why? Why? Naruto was holding his head, completely losing it. All the Konoha ninjas around him, including Sasuke, were sweating coldly. Especially Sasuke, who looked utterly speechless. He had really been counting on Naruto. Just then, the ground shook violently. The Konoha ninjas, facing the approaching massive monster, immediately turned serious again. This is no time for jokes. Guy, Shibi, come with me. Kakashi struggled to stand up. It wasn't that the other Konoha ninjas were useless, but against such a huge-tailed beast, the Yamato's swordsmanship and Asuma's ninjutsu were barely effective. Only Guy's 8 Gates taijutsu, Shibi's insects, and Sharingan could make a difference. In an instant, the three stood before Naruto and Sasuke. But just as they were about to attack, a voice rang out from the sky. Summoning jutsu, overwhelm the vendor jutsu. Hearing that voice, the three immediately breathed a huge sigh of relief. Naruto also jumped up excitedly. Boom! With a massive shadow descending from above, the perfect form of Shikaku was instantly crushed to the ground, stirring up sand waves more than 10 meters high. On the giant Shikaku's back appeared a huge blue-green toad carrying 2 swords on its back. And on top of the toad's head, a man with white hair and a kanji, oil, on his forehead appeared in everyone's view, striking a cool pose and announcing himself. Myaboku Mountain Toad Sage, Sannin Jiraiya, here to pay respects. Unfortunately, the coolness only lasted 3 seconds. Pervy Sage. Naruto's voice rang out. On top of the toad's head, Jiraiya immediately frowned with the kanji, well, on his forehead, angrily shouting at Naruto. Baka, baka. I told you not to call me that. Watching this quarrel between master and student, all the shinobi on the battlefield, whether from Sunagakure or Konoha, were sweating bullets. The Konoha ninjas felt embarrassed, but the Sunagakure ninjas were genuinely terrified. Hey, this man? Are you kidding? Could it be the legendary Sannin, Toad Sage Jiraiya? No way, wasn't this man said to have left Konoha long ago? At this moment, fear filled the hearts of the Sunagakure ninjas. Even Baki, the Umbu captain, felt despair for the first time facing this man. Temari standing beside him was stunned. Baki-sensei, is this guy really that strong? Ah, this man might be even stronger than the Kazekage. What? In Temari's heart, her father Raza was already the strongest. Now Baki-sensei told her this man was even more powerful. At that moment, Shikaku's angry roar echoed from the earth. Bastard, who is it? Oh, waking up so soon? Jiraiya immediately jumped away with Gamakichi, the toad. Shikaku's shattered body reformed, glaring angrily at the enormous toad before him. Bastard, unforgivable. You let me dash. Before he could finish, deep purple chakra began to gather at his mouth. This is... Kakashi looked horrified, Sasuke trembled. Because through their Sharingan, both saw the enormous chakra inside that ball of chakra. Asuma, Yamato, and Shibi were also shocked. Having experienced the Nine Tails rampage, they knew well the destructive power of a tailed beast's bomb. The Sunagakure ninjas knew this even better, since Shikaku had gone berserk many times in their village. Jiraiya's expression was serious but confident, his hands formed seals as he prepared to use the Yomi Numa, underworld swamp, technique to disrupt the tailed beast's bomb's launch. Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and his hands froze mid-seal, staring in disbelief at what unfolded. At that moment, Shikaku's giant lantern-like eyes fixed on a familiar figure suddenly appearing beside the tailed beast's bomb. The man stretched out his right hand, completely absorbing the chakra inside the tailed beast's bomb. Chapter 186, The True Protagonist. Father! In just an instant, Temari recognized the man who had appeared beside Shikaku's tailed beast's ball. The other Sunagakure shinobi also reacted, immediately becoming excited. The fear they had just felt at the appearance of one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya, vanished in an instant. This is great! It's Kazekage-sama. But only Baki felt that something was very wrong at that moment. Because he noticed that the Kazekage's state had changed again. He no longer looked like a lifeless corpse, as he had when they encountered him not long ago. Now he looked like a normal person. But strangely, Baki couldn't sense any chakra from him. And was it just his imagination, or had Kazekage-sama become younger? Baki had followed the Kazekage for over a decade, so he knew him better than anyone else in this world. It was precisely because of this that he was able to sharply detect what was off about the Kazekage in front of him. How should he put it? The youthful appearance of Kazekage-sama before him reminded Baki of over 10 years ago, when the Kazekage had just taken office. And if he wasn't mistaken, Kazekage-sama was absorbing Shikaku's chakra right now. He had never known the Kazekage possessed such an ability. So what the hell is going on? However, even though his heart was filled with questions, he couldn't show it right now. Because if the man in front of them wasn't the real Kazekage, then where had Kazekage-sama gone? Right now, Sunagakure couldn't afford to lose its Kage. Raza, however, had no intention of paying attention to the Sunagakure and Konohagakure shinobi below. His entire focus was on Shikaku's chakra. Since he had come to this world, as a traveler from a different timeline, he no longer needed to act cautiously. Besides, Gaara's condition was much better than Bunpuku's had been. If he didn't take this chance to extract Shikaku's chakra, when would he? The Sunagakure and Konohagakure shinobi below, along with Jiraiya, were also confused by the situation before them. So none of them made any sudden moves, simply staring in shock as Raza absorbed Shikaku's chakra. however, to form a chakra fruit. Just the chakra from a single-tailed beast ball was clearly not enough. You bastard. You're actually stealing my chakra. Watching as the familiar figure absorbed his tailed beast ball, Sunagakure's Fourth Kazekage, Shikaku flew into a rage. Just as he was about to resist, four stone pillars suddenly erupted from the ground around him. Countless sealing marks spread out from the pillars and completely bound Shikaku's body. Dragon Vein Seal. Damn it! This scene left everyone around stunned. What kind of sealing technique is that? Even someone as well-versed as Jiraiya had never heard of this seal. Raza had already finished absorbing the chakra from the tailed beast ball and descended from the sky, landing atop the immobilized Shikaku. Shikaku glared at Raza above him with eyes full of hatred. Raza didn't immediately awaken the future son he saw in front of him. Instead, he seized the opportunity and pressed the comma on his right hand directly onto Shikaku's head. In an instant, an even greater surge of Shikaku's chakra burst out from Gaara's seal, gathering onto Raza's right hand. No one knew how much time passed before a deep purple chakra fruit slowly materialized in Raza's hand. At that moment, everyone present was dumbfounded. Even Jiraiya stared in shock at the chakra fruit floating beside Raza's hand, utterly stunned and unable to comprehend what was happening. Only Black Zetsu, who had rushed over upon receiving the news, widened his pupils in disbelief when he saw the scene unfold. How is this possible? That's the power of the Otsutsuki clan. That's Mother's comma. What the hell is going on? Black Zetsu was completely stunned. Wasn't Mother sealed away by those two bastards, Hagoromo and Himura? Why was Mother's comma appearing on the Fourth Kazekage? Black Zetsu couldn't make sense of it at all. This sudden twist had scrambled even his thoughts. Meanwhile, as the massive amount of chakra from Shikaku was absorbed by Raza, Gaara's full transformation was completely undone. Shikaku's enormous body disintegrated into sand and vanished, leaving behind Gaara's frail body lying in Raza's arms, slowly regaining consciousness. The first thing Gaara saw when he opened his eyes was the blurry figure of his father, Raza. His gaze was filled with confusion. Was this a dream? Father. He had just begun to speak when he heard a gentle voice, something he had never heard before. Get some rest. When you wake up, everything will be better. Gaara truly was exhausted. The fatigue at that moment overwhelmed him, and he couldn't help but close his eyes again. Looking at the child in his arms, a convenient son from this world and a character Raza had always liked in the manga, Raza sighed and gently descended with a cloud of gold dust. In many ways, Gaara was Naruto without the protagonist's aura. Temari, Kankuro. Upon hearing their father call out, Temari and Kankuro immediately ran over. Both of them looked at Raza with a mix of fear and unease. Seeing this, Raza was a little speechless. All he could think was that the original version of himself in the story truly deserved his death. To ruin a perfectly good family and treat his own child with such cruelty. Take good care of your little brother. Little brother? Temari and Kankuro were both stunned. Their father had never referred to Gaara this way before. In his eyes, Gaara had always been the village's tailed beast weapon. Though they didn't understand, they anxiously received Gaara from Raza's arms. Only then did Raza look toward Baki, who was watching him from not far away with caution. Baki. Upon hearing Raza's voice, Baki trembled slightly. But after thinking for a moment, he quickly stepped forward and knelt down on one knee. Kazekage-sama. Are all the Sunagakure shinobi who took part in this operation present? Yes. Baki immediately nodded in response. Good. Then let's go. With that, Raza glanced briefly at the Konoha shinobi ahead, especially at Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki, then turned to leave. But just then, Jiraiya's voice rang out behind him. Oh! Kazekage of Sunagakure, are you planning to walk away just like that after your alliance with Otogakure attacked Konoha? Raza paused mid-step, turned, and looked at the familiar face standing atop a giant toad. Oh, one of the legendary Sannin, the Toad Sage Jiraiya. Are you trying to invite me to be a guest in Konoha? What a shame I'm not interested. But if you want to test your strength, well, I'm quite interested. Jiraiya was momentarily startled, then broke into a broad grin. Oh? You sound confident, Kazekage of Sunigakure. In that case, let me, the great sage Jiraiya of Mount Maiboku, see how strong you really are. Kakashi, take Naruto and the others and withdraw. The next battle isn't one you can get involved in. Humph. Raza snorted with interest. Baki, take all the Sunigakure shinobi and retreat 10 kilometers. Yes. And so, what should have been a battle for the younger generation quickly escalated into a clash between titans. Chapter 187, Raza vs. Jiraiya, Part 1. Why did Jiraiya insist on starting a battle with Raza here? The reason was simple: intelligence. Before arriving, he had already received information from the ANBU back in the village. He learned that Orochimaru had used the Edo Tensei to resurrect the first Hokage, second Hokage, and the fourth Kazekage. However, the Kazekage had somehow broken free from the Jutsu's control on his own, severing Orochimaru's influence. Though Jiraiya wasn't a forbidden jutsu enthusiast like Orochimaru, he knew very well what the Edo Tensei entailed. It was a forbidden technique that resurrected the dead. Which meant the fourth Kazekage should also be a dead man. And yet, just look at the man standing in front of him. He didn't resemble a reanimated corpse in the slightest. More than that, there was the mysterious ability to absorb chakra, and that strange chakra cluster that looked like a fruit. What was that? Jiraiya had far too many unanswered questions. If he allowed this man to return to Sunigakure, he might never get the answers. So naturally, he wasn't about to pass up this chance. And Jiraiya was very confident in his own strength. Raza accepted the challenge because his reasons were simpler. He simply wanted to see what kind of power Jiraiya, one of the strongest shinobi of this generation, truly possessed. With Orochimaru's hands now sealed and the third Hokage dead, Jiraiya was, without question, among the top-tier powerhouses in the current shinobi world. Following the orders from Raza and Jiraiya, both sides shinobi retreated without hesitation. When they had fallen back about 10 kilometers, Kakashi didn't even look back as he spoke. Sasuke, Naruto, watch this fight carefully. This level of battle defines the strongest in the shinobi world, the strength of a Kage. Sasuke and Naruto were taken aback at first, then their expressions turned serious. One sought revenge against his brother to avenge his clan, the other wanted to become Hokage and earn everyone's recognition. At that moment, Sakura could clearly feel herself drifting farther away from her two teammates. Asuma patted Shikamaru on the shoulder with a look that conveyed encouragement without words. As for Shino, mature beyond his years, he was already focusing intently on the battle even without his father's guidance. On the other side, Kankuro nervously carried his unconscious younger brother Gaara, while Temari stood by looking deeply worried. Baki's brows were furrowed, his silence representing the mood of Sunigakure's side. Perhaps this was why the protagonists became protagonists, while the supporting cast remained just that. But in the future, everything would change. Whoosh! A soft breeze swept through the forest canopy. Raza stood upon his cloud of gold dust, facing off against Jiraiya atop the giant Gamabunta. Since he was seeking information, Jiraiya naturally took the initiative to speak. Come to think of it, I've fought plenty of skilled Sunigakure shinobi before. I've experienced the Iron Sand technique of the third Kazekage firsthand. I wonder, which is stronger, the gold dust technique of the fourth or the Iron Sand of the third? The first thing Jiraiya needed to confirm was whether the man before him was truly the fourth Kazekage. Ninjas could easily disguise themselves, but their techniques, especially something as unique as Sunigakure's magnet release, were far harder to fake. Kumogakure also possessed a version of magnet release, but theirs was a combination of wind and lightning nature transformation. In contrast, Sunigakure's magnet release combined wind and earth. That created a fundamental difference. Kumogakure's focused on magnetic force, while Sunigakure's excelled at manipulating metal. Of course, Raza understood what Jiraiya was getting at, and he was more than willing to play along. Is that so? In that case, let me show you, Sage of the Toads. As he spoke, Raza brought his hands together in a seal. Sage Art, Limit Release, Magnet Release, Quicksand Waterfall. Boom! In an instant, the entire forest began to quake. Even the Konoha and Sunagakure shinobi who had retreated 10 kilometers away could feel the earth shaking like a natural disaster had descended. Cracks split across the ground, forming jagged fault lines. Before they could even comprehend what was happening, the sky darkened. Massive waves of sand, glinting with golden flecks, surged forth like a tide from the distance, hurtling toward Jiraiya to engulf him. At that moment, the Konoha Genin's pupils dilated in shock. When they'd seen Shikaku in its complete form earlier, their entire understanding of the shinobi world's power had already been shattered. But now, this was something else entirely. The full-body Shikaku had only been about 50 meters tall. Yet this sandstorm, laced with gold, towered nearly 100 meters high, blotting out the sky. Unlike the Konoha Nin, the shinobi of Sunagakure were practically ecstatic. So powerful. This is the power of the Kazekage? This kind of power, it must be divine. All hail the Kazekage-sama. Even Raza's own children, Temari and Kankuro, stood frozen, mouths agape at the overwhelming display of golden sand. Only Baki's expression remained deeply troubled. He could confirm this was indeed the Kazekage, no one else could wield gold dust, but having grown up under Raza's command, Baki knew, the Kazekage had never possessed this level of power before. And that's when Kakashi, watching with his Sharingan, suddenly shouted in disbelief. Impossible. What is it, Kakashi? Guy asked, alarmed. Kakashi's face was grim, the 3 tomo in his left eye spinning rapidly. Chakra. I can't see any chakra from this Kazekage at all. What? At Kakashi's words, Sasuke, who had also activated his 2-tomo Sharingan, looked toward the swirling storm of gold. Sure enough, he saw no trace of chakra within the sand. What the hell is going on? And of course, Jiraiya, facing Raza directly, sensed something too. Staring at the massive tidal wave of golden sand blotting out the sky, Jiraiya's brows furrowed. He spoke to the toad beneath him. Bunta, you feel it too, right? Yeah, Jiraiya-sama. But it's strange. It's not chakra, and it's not natural energy either. Could this be the secret to his resurrection? Never mind, first let's stop this move. Combination technique. Got it! Jiraiya instantly wove hand seals. Ninjutsu, Toad Oil Flame Bullet. Flames erupted from Jiraiya's mouth in a blazing torrent. Gamabunta, from atop the battlefield, spewed the special oil of Mount Myaboku, rich in natural energy. The combination of the oil and Jiraiya's fire style burst forth in a wave of fire like a tsunami, painting the entire sky a blazing red. Even from over 10 kilometers away, both Konoha and Sunagakure shinobi could feel the searing heat. So strong! Naruto was speechless. He had always known the Pervy Sage was strong, but until now, he had never truly understood how strong. As he watched the sky ignite in flames, he finally grasped it, and became utterly fired up. Beside him, Sasuke Uchiha's face darkened. Because he knew Jiraiya was Naruto's teacher. With a mentor like this, Naruto would undoubtedly surpass him soon. Sasuke couldn't stand it. He clenched his fists in frustration. But the battle wasn't going to wait for the musings of young protagonists. The golden wave of sand and the crimson blaze of fire collided with a thunderous roar. Chapter 188, Raza vs. Jiraiya, Part 2. The blazing fire and golden sand dyed the entire sky in 2 halves, one red, one gold. Even from a great distance, everyone present could feel the scorching heat radiating from the clash. This battle, moment by moment, was shattering Sasuke Uchiha's understanding of the shinobi world. Up until now, Sasuke had always believed that the Uchiha clan's fire-style jutsu were the strongest. But as he gazed at the inferno before him, fire so intense it looked like it could incinerate the sky, that Uchiha pride was once again ground into the dirt. The fire style he was so proud of, when compared to the one Jiraiya now displayed, was like a firefly trying to outshine the moon. And the gold dust jutsu controlled by the Kazekage far surpassed Gaara's sand. One ruled the sky, the other barely the ground. So this is the power of a Kage? The clash between fire and gold continued. To the naked eye, the front of Raza's golden sand began to melt instantly before the blazing heat, losing form and control. This alone was enough to prove the intensity of the flames and the sheer power behind Jiraiya's fire style. And yet, Jiraiya didn't relax at all. In fact, he grew more tense, forehead clutching with wrinkles, because as someone directly engaged in the battle, he could clearly see it was only the front layer of the gold dust being melted. Gold, being a metal, didn't conduct heat efficiently. And the sheer volume of the gold dust spread across the sky was simply too massive. Then suddenly, from within the sea of flames that looked like a mountain of fire, a gigantic golden spinning top shot forth, rotating rapidly as it flew straight toward Jiraiya. So it's spinning to generate a vacuum barrier, shielding itself from the flames? Clever. Ninjutsu, Wild Lion's main technique. Jiraiya's silver-white hair instantly extended and transformed into countless white tendrils that shot out toward the spinning gold dust top. In mere moments, they wrapped tightly around it. As his hair constricted, an ear-piercing grinding sound rang out, and under that pressure, the spinning top was forcibly brought to a halt by nothing but Jiraiya's hair. At that moment, Jiraiya had already prepared his next move. A bright chakra sphere formed in his right hand, emanating intense chakra. Leaping forward, he closed the distance and slammed the chakra sphere directly onto the golden top. In an instant, what had looked like an unbreakable construct now turned fragile before that chakra sphere. Like ice meeting fire, the gold dust began to shatter. As the chakra sphere dug into the structure, penetrating it, Jiraiya immediately leapt away. And then, boom! A thunderous explosion rocked the battlefield. Golden dust scattered into the air like a rain of shimmering gold. So strong! Kakashi-sensei, what jutsu was that? Naruto's eyes were wide with awe, practically glued to the scene. Kakashi blinked, then glanced at Naruto before replying, his tone filled with nostalgia. That jutsu is called the Rasengan. It was created by the hero who saved Konoha, the fourth Hokage himself. What's more, it's a jutsu that requires no hand seals. Sasuke stiffened in shock, but Naruto was already hopping in excitement. So strong! I'm definitely going to make Pervy-Sage teach me that jutsu. A flicker of jealousy rose in Sasuke's heart because he knew that if Naruto really learned that jutsu, then Naruto might truly surpass him. Damn it! This time, Sasuke finally realized how powerful shinobi from the outside world truly were. Meanwhile, he had been stuck here playing childish games with Naruto and the others. Clenching his fists tightly, the two Tomo in his Sharingan spun furiously. He had to observe this battle carefully, to understand just how far the gap was between himself and these real powerhouses. But just then, he noticed that his Sharingan couldn't detect Jiraiya's presence. Sasuke immediately understood. He must have hidden himself using the smoke and light from the explosion. But where exactly did he go? How could he evade the perception of the Sharingan? With Jiraiya vanishing and the flames losing their chakra support, the fire was quickly extinguished by the sand. The entire forest turned into a golden desert. But not only was there no sign of Jiraiya, but Gamabunta had also vanished. However, while Jiraiya's concealment could deceive the Sharingan, it couldn't fool Raza, who now possessed extraordinary sensory abilities. This feeling, is it a barrier technique? Gold Dust Shuriken! In an instant, countless gold dust shuriken shot out from beneath Raza's feet, flying toward a massive tree half buried in the sand. Hidden among its leaves was a red toad. How is that possible? Within the barrier of Toad Gourd Prison, a concealment technique unique to Mount Maiboku, Jiraiya was stunned. That was a barrier that should have been undetectable. How did the opponent discover it? But now wasn't the time to figure that out. The red toad quickly leapt out from the foliage to evade the incoming attack. At the same time, its mouth opened wide, and Jiraiya burst out from within, a Rasengan forming in his hand as he rushed toward Raza. The red toad simultaneously attacked from another angle, extending its tongue in an attempt to bind Raza. And from above Raza's head, a massive shadow fell. It was the missing Gamabunta, descending from the sky, twin swords in hand. Raza, standing upon his floating cloud of gold dust, was instantly caught in a three-way pincer attack. "Father!" Temari cried out from afar, shocked by the scene. Yet Raza didn't even flinch. Facing Jiraiya's overwhelming assault, he simply clasped his hands together. Sage Art Limit, Magnet Style, Gold Dust World Barrier. In that instant, Jiraiya felt the sand beneath his feet begin to writhe violently. The gold dust surged upward like a geyser, transforming into countless razor-sharp spikes, forming a dense forest of needles all around Raza. The red toad's tongue was instantly severed. Seeing the deadly spike barrier below, Gamabunta made a split-second decision. He immediately dissolved the summoning contract and returned to Mount Maiboku. If he hadn't, even if he didn't die, he would have been severely injured. As for Jiraiya, he quickly cancelled his Rasengan and formed hand seals. Earth Style, Earth Flow Wall. Using the rising wall of earth to block the incoming gold dust, he rapidly retreated. Moments later, Jiraiya looked grimly at the earth wall, which was now riddled with holes. Exceptional sensory abilities and perfect offensive-defense integration with magnet style, he's practically impenetrable. So long-range tactics and sudden strikes won't work. And in close combat, he can absorb chakra. Jiraiya's forehead tensed up. That means if I want to gauge his true strength, I'll have to rely on taijutsu or sage mode. At that moment, Jiraiya wasn't the only one deep in thought, so were the other Konoha shinobi. As expected of a Kazekage, he's really tough to handle. "Shikamaru, if it were you, what would you do?" Shikamaru shot a look at his teacher, Asuma, but after thinking it over, he answered. "If it were me, I'd change the battlefield. Somewhere near a river or the sea. Otherwise, that ability is way too broken." Hearing that, everyone looked at Shikamaru with admiration. As expected of Shikaku's son. But just then, Sasuke suddenly asked in a low voice. "Sensei, between those two and that man, who's stronger?" Chapter 189, Raza vs. Jiraiya, Part 3. Sasuke's words took everyone by surprise. Especially the adults. Of course, they all knew exactly who Sasuke meant by that man. Having been through the Land of Waves incident and knowing what had happened to Sasuke, even Naruto could only stare blankly at him. Kakashi's expression darkened. After thinking it over, he still decided to explain. A shinobi's strength is generally divided into ninjutsu, taijutsu, and jinjutsu, and beyond that, chakra itself. Jiraiya-sama and the Kazekage have already reached the pinnacle in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and chakra. As for jinjutsu, while I've heard that Jiraiya-sama isn't particularly skilled in it, at this level, most jinjutsu wouldn't work on them anyway. As he said this, Kakashi noticed Sasuke's tightly clenched fists, and he continued. Of course, the Sharingan's power can't be understood by conventional logic. So, when it comes to who is stronger, it's not something we can clearly say in just a few words. What about chakra control and hand seals? Sakura suddenly asked. Because, maybe that was the only area in which she could still hope to catch up to Sasuke and Naruto. Kakashi had once praised her for it. This time, it was Asuma who answered, looking toward the two distant figures. At the level of Jiraiya-sama and the Kazekage, chakra control and hand seals are merely basic abilities. Asuma spoke up partly to help his laid-back student Shikamaru recognize the reality of the shinobi world. Basic abilities? Sakura was stunned. That's right. Asuma said, patting Shikamaru's shoulder as he looked out into the distance. You all watched the battle just now between those two, did you notice anything? Notice what? Team 10's trio looked confused, except for Shikamaru, who seemed to realize something. Jiraiya-sama and the Kazekage barely used hand seals. Or rather, their seals were extremely simple. All the jonin present looked at Shikamaru with approval. Exactly. That's what I meant. Once you reach Jiraiya-sama and the Kazekage's level, chakra control and hand seal speed are merely the fundamentals. But that doesn't mean they aren't important. Heck, on the contrary, they're the foundation required to reach that level. So you really need to stop slacking off, Shikamaru. Shikamaru's face stiffened. Yeah. What a drag. And at that moment, with his next battle strategy now decided, Jiraiya launched his assault. This time, he abandoned ninjutsu altogether, and began probing with pure taijutsu. Whoosh! As a non-bloodline limit user, Jiraiya's taijutsu was absurdly strong. His figure turned into a blur as he dashed across the gold dust-covered forest floor, heading straight toward Raza. So fast. Sasuke realized, to his shock, that even with the Sharingan activated, he couldn't follow Jiraiya's movements. That kind of speed, even someone like Lee using the 8 gates couldn't keep up. As a taijutsu user himself, Guy suddenly lit up with excitement. As expected of Jiraiya-sama, his taijutsu mastery is truly formidable. Jiraiya's body moved with incredible agility, weaving through the rain of gold dust shuriken and the deadly gold dust barrier technique. He evaded everything flawlessly, closing in on Raza in a matter of moments. Raza's eyes lit up with interest. Compared to the Jiraiya of his own time, this older Jiraiya clearly had aged quite a bit, but in terms of taijutsu, he was even stronger now. Raza didn't summon his gold dust to continue attacking. Instead, he seemed intrigued and chose to engage Jiraiya directly with taijutsu. Jiraiya's eyes also lit up in response. He was confident in his taijutsu, forged under the punishing strength of Tsunade's monstrous fists. Besides, he had one thing he was sure of: the Fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure shouldn't be that good at taijutsu. This wasn't just an assessment based on intel, but also based on Raza's bloodline limit, magnet release. After all, one's energy is limited. Sunagakure's magnet release clearly wasn't a bloodline that synergized well with close combat. Not to mention, Raza was more than 10 years younger. But the moment their fists clashed, Jiraiya realized just how wrong he had been. Boom! A powerful force surged from Raza's punch. It wasn't quite as monstrous as Tsunade's, but it was still shocking enough to leave Jiraiya in disbelief. How is this possible? Even this young man's taijutsu is this strong? Raza, indeed, had never been a taijutsu-oriented shinobi. In the past, he'd been more like a mage type, relying on his magnet release. But everything had changed after he gained access to the 8 gates. Now, thanks to intense training, Raza's body had reached the level where he could maintain 5 gates in a normal state. Not just a burst of 5 gates, but a constant state of 5 gates. What difference did that make? Put simply, Raza's body was now fully adapted to the strain of 5 gates, meaning when he pushed himself, he could unleash power beyond it. Boom! Just like now. Jiraiya's brief moment of surprise gave Raza an opening. He exploded forward with a speed beyond the 5th gate, driving a powerful kick straight into Jiraiya's chest. Jiraiya reacted quickly and blocked with his arms, but the impact still sent him flying like a broken kite. He crashed through several trees, carving a long trench into the earth before finally skidding to a stop. Pervy Sage! Jiraiya-sama! No way! Naruto and the others shouted anxiously. The scene was utterly beyond everyone's expectations. The Kazekage is actually this strong? It was one thing for him to suppress Jiraiya with ninjutsu, but even his taijutsu was this overwhelming? As the dust settled, Jiraiya's somewhat battered figure became visible to the crowd. Fortunately, he didn't seem seriously injured, just a bit roughed up, with some tears in his clothing. He had his monstrous endurance, honed under Tsunade's training, to thank for that. But Jiraiya's expression had never been this serious. Though they had only been fighting for barely over 10 minutes, he was already feeling the pressure. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, and that strange force that didn't even seem like chakra. At this rate, Jiraiya realized he'd have to go all out. He'd need to enter Sage mode just to gauge the full extent of Raza's power. But, Was it worth going that far? If he did, it could escalate into a full-scale war between Sunagakure and Konohagakure. Right now, the old man, the third Hokage, was likely already dead, and the village was still in ruins after Orochimaru's assault. If war broke out now, Jiraiya felt a heavy sense of powerlessness at the thought. Just as he hesitated, Raza lost interest. He had already realized Jiraiya was no longer a match for him. Even if Jiraiya entered Sage mode, Raza wouldn't be afraid. After all, he had only used his gold dust so far. He hadn't even touched the rest of his arsenal. And although they stood on opposite sides, Raza had a certain respect for someone like Jiraiya. He wasn't someone he would kill without cause. So, he simply spoke up. This ends here. Raza's declaration shocked everyone present. This entire Konoha collapse plan was orchestrated by your rogue ninja, Orochimaru. It's your village's internal matter. Sunagakure has no interest in meddling further. So let's end it here. Of course, if Konoha insists on continuing the fight, we won't back down either. Baki, pull everyone back. Chapter 190, Future Time and Space. One day later. In the land of rain, the steel and concrete-filled Amigakure stood solemn beneath the rare clear sky. For once, the sunlight managed to pierce through the usual heavy clouds. Atop the rooftop of a tall building, a young man with bright orange hair sat quietly. He wore the iconic black cloak adorned with red clouds. The warm sunlight bathed him as he gazed over all of Amigakure beneath him. Time passed in silence. Eventually, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. A woman with blue hair, also dressed in the black and red Akatsuki cloak, approached. The young man didn't even turn his head as he asked, "Conan, is everyone here?" Before long, deep within a dim and damp cavern, where water dripped steadily from above, a series of ghostly figures appeared one after another. So everyone's finally gathered. This is the first full assembly since Orochimaru left the organization years ago. That bastard Orochimaru, someday, I'll make sure he pays. Hey, what's going on, Pain? Delaying my money-making, unforgivable. Once everyone had arrived, the long-silent Pain finally opened his eyes and spoke slowly. This gathering of the Akatsuki is because there is something that everyone must know. Oh? What is it? Could it be that the plan is finally starting? Pain didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Zetsu. Zetsu, share the intelligence you just received. Zetsu, his form resembling a carnivorous plant, scanned the gathered members and began to speak in a low tone. Just yesterday, on the final day of Konoha's Chunin exams, Orochimaru launched the Konoha Crush plan in collaboration with Sunagakure and launched an attack on the village. Oh! Zetsu's words instantly caught everyone's attention. A shark-toothed figure immediately looked toward a comrade with crimson Sharingan eyes. Itachi-senpai, you're from Konoha, right? A smaller figure asked bluntly. What was the result? The entire event was quite interesting. Initially, Sunagakure was meant to be allied with Orochimaru. But mid-battle, they abruptly withdrew. However, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, was still killed by his former student. As for Orochimaru, his arms were sealed. His arms were sealed? Yes. According to our intel, Hiruzen used a sealing technique called the Reaper Death Seal to seal both of Orochimaru's arms. This means Orochimaru can no longer use ninjutsu. The small figure's eyes lit up. Interesting. That means we might be able to retrieve that ring from Orochimaru soon. No, retrieving the ring isn't urgent. Pain's voice cut in coldly. Zetsu, continue. What do you mean? There's more? A figure with glowing green eyes asked curiously. Ah. Zetsu seemed almost excited now. During Orochimaru's battle with the third Hokage, he used the forbidden technique Edo Tensei, and summoned the first Hokage, the second Hokage, and the fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure. At that moment, everyone was stunned. So that's how it is. Orochimaru actually has such methods? In that case, we really can't just strike at Orochimaru recklessly. Oh? Kakuzu-senpai, are you afraid? The figure with green eyes snorted coldly, showing no shame in his fear. Humph. You who haven't experienced that era don't understand what the name Senju Hashirama represents. He was a monster who single-handedly unified the entire shinobi world. No, a god. Even if all of us joined forces, we wouldn't stand a chance against him. Hey, Kakuzu-senpai, aren't you exaggerating a bit? No, not at all. Silence fell over the entire cavern. Everyone here had no doubts about Kakuzu's strength. If even Kakuzu feared him, then the true terror of the shinobi god was unquestionable. Even Pain, who always claimed to be a god himself, remained quiet and coldly continued. Continue. Oh, the interesting things aren't over yet? The truly interesting part has just begun. The fourth Kazekage, who was killed by Orochimaru and resurrected through Edo Tensei, suddenly broke free from Orochimaru's control. Moreover, he used some unknown method to fully revive himself and fought a battle with Jiraiya, one of Konoha's legendary Sannin. Fully revived? What does that mean? The short figure let out a surprised sound. It means exactly what it sounds like. Edo Tensei summons the souls of the dead from the Pure Land, meaning those resurrected by it must be deceased. However, we have confirmed that the fourth Kazekage who fought Jiraiya is truly resurrected, not merely a puppet controlled by Edo Tensei. What? Hey, fully revived? You're not joking, right? Is that really possible? At this moment, the usually silent Pain spoke. Sasori, you're from Sunagakure, right? Does your village have any forbidden jutsu that can bring back the dead? The short figure gave Pain a side glance. No, at least none that I know of. At this point, everyone understood. So that's why, boss, you were so eager to have us here? At that, Pain issued a direct order. Sasori, since you're from Sunagakure, you and Conan will go investigate how this dead but revived Kazekage managed to come back. Zetsu, you will support them. No problem, I'm very interested in this ability to truly revive the dead. Then, Itachi. You and Kisame will go to Konoha to gather information. Focus especially on the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Also, take a look at your little brother. Apparently Orochimaru is very interested in his eyes. After the death of the third Hokage, big changes are sure to come to Konoha. Other great ninja villages may see this as an opportunity to attack. As for the rest of you, continue with the plan as scheduled. That's all for now. Meeting dismissed. Meanwhile, in Sunagakure, Raza sat on his Kazekage seat, looking over various reports about this world sent by Baki, and discovered something intriguing. Though this world was indeed the future world from his own, it was not completely identical. Because he initially assumed that since this was a parallel world where his past did not exist, he might be able to regain the powers of dragon veins and monsters again. But when he asked Baki to send related information, he found there were no legends about Roran here, no shrine maidens, and no monstrous spirits in the land of demons. Moreover, as he looked closer, Raza realized what the real difference in this world was. To be exact, this was a world that only had the main Naruto storyline, without any movies or original characters. For example, Raza did not find Centipede in the list of ninja from this era's Sunagakure. This dashed some of Raza's hopes. However, that did not hinder his next plans. At that moment, a knock came from outside. Without lifting his head, Raza said, "Come in." Chapter 191, The Fifth Kazekage. As the door to the Kazekage's office was pushed open, a group of people walked in. Leading them were familiar faces to Raza. They were Chiyo and Ebizo from this future world. Both looked at Raza with a mix of caution and inquiry in their eyes. Behind the two elders were two unfamiliar men. Their identities were clear. They were the current leaders of the noble and commoner factions in Sunagakure and also the village's present elders. As for Michikawa and Pakura, according to the intel just received, the original Raza of this future timeline had betrayed Pakura to Kirigakure and eliminated the Michikawa faction to solidify his position as Kazekage. Ruthless indeed. Behind those two men stood Baki, the current head of the Umbu, and beside Baki were Raza's children, Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara. It had to be said, Jinchuriki really did have incredible regenerative capabilities. It had only been one day, and Gaara could already get out of bed and walk on his own. At that moment, everyone in the room was staring at the Kazekage seated before them with strange expressions. Although the person seemed to be the same, he looked far too young. Moreover, the intel from Konoha had left the people of Sunagakure full of conflicted thoughts. Seeing this, Raza set down the scroll in his hand and addressed everyone. Sit. The four elders took their seats, while Baki, along with Temari and the others, remained standing at the side. Raza didn't waste time, as he didn't intend to linger here. I'll get straight to the point. I believe you've received some intel already. It's true, I'm already dead. In an instant, everyone in the office had a sharp reaction. Even Gaara was startled, and Temari anxiously cried out, Dad! Father! Of course, Raza had no intention of telling the truth. He wouldn't reveal his origin to this world sage of six paths. He had already prepared what he was going to say next. 4 days ago, while I was on my way to Konoha to meet Orochimaru, that bastard suddenly attacked me. Understanding the cause, everyone was not only shocked but also erupted in anger. Damn Orochimaru. We must avenge you, Kazekage-sama. Konoha must pay the price. Only Elder Chiyo remained calm and asked. Then Kazekage-sama, what is your current state? That question instantly drew everyone's attention. Orochimaru, in order to strike against his former master, used the Edo Tensei to resurrect me. Edo Tensei? You mean the forbidden jutsu invented by the second Hokage, Senjutobarama? Chiyo and Ebizo had once fought against the second Hokage, so they naturally knew about Edo Tensei. The two new elders, along with Baki, Temari, and the others, heard this and immediately concluded that the Kazekage must truly have died. Temari was unable to accept it, and her expression turned pained. Yes, however, I was fortunate to know the method of releasing Edo Tensei, and thanks to a special secret technique, I can now be considered temporarily truly revived. Truly revived. Temporarily. This time, everyone in the room was once again stunned. Umechim, I'm not sure how long I can remain in this state. That's why I had Baki summon all of you here, only for one purpose. While I'm still alive and able to maintain stability in Sunagakure, I want to appoint a new Kazekage. Just when everyone thought they had reached the limit of their surprise, Raza's next words sent an even stronger shock through the room. I've already chosen the 5th Kazekage. It will be Gaara. At that moment, a collective gasp filled the office. Gaara's pupils contracted sharply. Temari and Kankuro stared at their father and younger brother in disbelief. Chiyo and Ebizo furrowed their brows in deep silence. Baki, however, seemed thoughtful. To him, this was actually a favorable decision. As Kazekage's confidant and Gaara's mentor, having Gaara as Kazekage would indeed be ideal. However, one major obstacle remained. The two new elders immediately sprang to their feet and shouted angrily. I object. Kazekage-sama, not only is Gaara still just a genin, but his identity also makes it impossible for him to become Kazekage. That's right. Never in Sunagakure's history has a Jinchuriki become Kazekage. Gaara is far too unstable. He could lose control at any moment. Handing the village over to a ticking time bomb? I refuse. The atmosphere in the office instantly turned tense and hostile. Raza merely snorted coldly and began to speak slowly. I think you're mistaken about something. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm informing you. Chiyo and Ebizo's pupils narrowed. They could clearly sense Raza's killing intent in that moment. But the two new elders still shouted. No. Kazekage-sama, The appointment of a new Kazekage isn't up to you alone. It requires the approval of the Council of Elders. That's right. And let's not forget, you're already dead. Even when you were alive, you couldn't act with such impunity. Raza narrowed his eyes, but his face returned to its usual relaxed expression. Is that so? Then I suppose I have no choice. What? Schlunk! Two golden sand spears pierced straight through the hearts of the two elders, pinning them to the wall with immense force. Bright red blood trickled down the gleaming spears as the men struggled in vain. At that moment, everyone in the office froze. Even Chio and Ebizo stood up in shock, staring at Raza in horror. His attack had been so fast that even they couldn't react in time, which meant that if Raza wanted them dead, it would take only a heartbeat. Baki, Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara all looked panicked and terrified. But Raza acted as though he had done nothing more than flick away a speck of dust. He spoke plainly. Baki, take care of the cleanup. Also, have the Umbu keep a close watch. These are extraordinary times, and we will take extraordinary measures. Anyone who tries to cause trouble during this period should be arrested immediately. Baki was trembling as he looked at the corpses still hanging from the wall. He responded shakily. Why yes, understood, Kazekage-sama. Only then did Raza turn his gaze toward Chio and Ebizo. As soon as he did, both of them grew highly alert. Chio's expression darkened as she spoke. What? Does the Fourth Kazekage plan to eliminate us old geezers too? Of course not. Though they were old, both of them possessed Kage-level power. If they died as well, Sunagakure would truly be left without anyone capable. Raza couldn't afford to touch them. No. I want to trade a piece of intel with you, to gain your support for Gaara becoming the fifth Kazekage. The two elders were taken aback. Chio asked with a hostile expression. What kind of intel? Of course, it's about your beloved grandson and the culprit behind the death of the third Kazekage, Sasori. In this future timeline, the death of the third Kazekage remained an unsolved mystery. So when those words left Raza's mouth, everyone present was shocked, followed by expressions of total disbelief. That said, Chio from both timelines had already suspected as much, so she had always been prepared for this truth. Of course, if you're willing, I can go right now and capture Sasori, bring him to you, and let you reunite with your grandson. Chapter 192, Black Zetsu. The office fell silent. Chio looked at Raza with a grave expression. The two of them simply stared at each other for a long while. Finally, Chio slowly withdrew the vigilance in her eyes and asked coldly. Where is that child, Sasori, now? Seeing this, Raza knew Chio had made her choice. No matter which world it was, Sasori was always Chio's soft spot. Sasori has joined an organization called Akatsuki. Orochimaru is also a part of that group. Sasori even turned himself and the corpse of the third Kazekage into human puppets. At that moment, Baki was too shocked to speak. He could only gape at the two elders and the Kazekage. I agree. I will help Gaara become the fifth Kazekage. Hearing this, Ebizo couldn't say anything either. However, he still voiced his concern without hiding it. Kazekage-sama, having a Jinchuriki become Kazekage, the instability of Shikaku within him is a serious issue. Gaara, who had been shocked at first, now wore a cold expression. Being made Kazekage, this was something Gaara never expected. But he didn't believe it was out of love for his father. To him, this was just another form of being used. I will take care of Gaara's problem. As for the rest, I'll leave it to you two elders. Baki, you'll lead the Umbu and assist them. Temari, Kankuro, Gaara, you three stay behind. Yes. Chio, Ebizo, and Baki all wore complex expressions as they slowly began to leave. Baki even thoughtfully handled the corpses of the two elders. Once the three of them left, only Raza's family was left in the office. Raza looked at his three discount children, Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara. The three of them looked at their father in return, their eyes filled with confusion, sorrow, and coldness. "All right, you all heard what I just said. Temari, Kankuro, you're Gaara's older sister and brother. Once Gaara becomes Kazekage, you must fully support him." Kankuro was immediately thrown into confusion. Looking at his younger brother, there was a hint of fear in his eyes. Temari hesitated, then spoke. "Father!" "Don't worry. I've already absorbed a large portion of Shikaku's chakra from Gaara. On top of that, I've reinforced his seal. Even if Gaara uses his feigned sleep technique, Shikaku won't break free so easily anymore." Upon hearing this, Kankuro let out a breath of relief. Temari's expression grew more complicated as she looked at Gaara. Gaara's face remained cold, as he had never dared to say anything in protest to his father. Seeing this, Raza understood. Because of him, Gaara never had that pivotal battle with Naruto. As a result, his inner wounds remained unresolved. If Raza weren't the Kazekage, he might have welcomed the idea of Naruto and Gaara becoming friends. But given his current role, he couldn't allow the future Kazekage to become the Konoha Hokage's fanboy. Fortunately, Raza had his own method to help Gaara overcome his emotional barriers. All he needed was. Just as Raza was about to speak, his sensory perception picked up on a startling presence. "Interesting. You've come to me on your own. Stay here and don't move. I'll be right back." As soon as the words left his mouth, Raza's figure vanished, leaving the three siblings staring at each other in confusion. Sunagakure. Though they were outsiders, Sasori and Konan entered the village as if it were completely unguarded, passing through its defenses without resistance. Looking at the sand-covered landscape before him, Sasori's voice came from beneath his puppet shell, low and cold. "How dull. It's been 20 years, and Sunagakure hasn't changed a bit." Walking beside him, Konan spoke slowly. "I didn't expect that even after leaving Sunagakure for so long, you'd still have a spy planted here. Just a precautionary measure." Sasori replied indifferently. Konan didn't pursue the subject further and directly asked. "Zetsu, can you sense the Kazekage's location?" From the yellow sand behind them, a green Venus flytrap slowly rose from the ground. As it opened, Zetsu's form was revealed. His expression showed a hint of confusion as he spoke. "Strange. I can't sense the Kazekage's chakra at all. Looks like this Kazekage is hiding more secrets than we thought. To be able to completely block Zetsu's sensing. No matter." Sasori's gaze turned toward the tallest building in the center of the village. As Kazekage, there are only a few places he could be. We just need to search them one by one. But be careful not to expose our presence. "Don't worry," Konan replied coldly. "Gathering intelligence is my specialty. You're the one who should be cautious. Don't let anyone who knows you spot you." With that, Konan's body turned into countless sheets of paper and flew off into the village. Sasori gave a cold snort at the sight, then began moving, his puppet body clanking as he headed toward the places locked in his memory. Watching them leave, Zetsu's body was overtaken by Black Zetsu, who now dominated White Zetsu's consciousness. Staring at Sunagakure in the distance, he fell into deep thought and muttered. "What is going on? The only technique that can revive someone from an Edo Tensei state is the Rinne rebirth, but without the Rinnegan, how did the Fourth Kazekage pull it off? And that was definitely Mother's Kama, but ever since she fused with this world, the Kama should have lost its functionality." Just as Black Zetsu was drowning in a sea of confusion, a voice suddenly rang out behind him. "If you want answers, why not just ask me directly?" Black Zetsu's pupils shrank instantly. His body shot backward as he turned around, only to see the very man he had just been obsessing over standing behind him, smiling. "Impossible. You actually..." Instinctively, Black Zetsu tried to activate Mayfly to escape, but Raza's next words made him pause. "No need to be afraid. I'm here to propose a collaboration." "Collaboration?" Black Zetsu froze, but indeed didn't try to run again. With a guarded expression, he stared at the man before him and asked in a cold tone. What do you mean? Raza's expression was calm. Exactly what I said. But before we continue this conversation, can you guarantee that everything I say here won't be sensed by Hashirama Otsutsuki? Black Zetsu's face suddenly showed panic. For Raza to mention that name, could it be? Of course I can. That Hashirama guy may have strong sensory abilities, but he's not omniscient. As long as there's no chakra presence, he can't detect anything. And you? Is it because of Kagaya's power that Hashirama can't sense you either? Black Zetsu's round eyes widened in shock, then filled with fury. You! How do you know about Mother's existence? Who the hell are you? But Raza didn't answer. He only asked. Now, do you think we have grounds for cooperation? Chapter 193, Seeking the Skin of a Tiger. Sunagakure. A gust of yellow sand swept through the village. For the first time in countless years, Black Zetsu, who had always believed the entire shinobi world to be within his grasp, felt truly unsettled. In that moment, he even considered striking down the man before him to eliminate the source of this unease. But the other party's mysterious aura and his stated intent to cooperate made Black Zetsu suppress his agitation and slowly speak. Cooperate? What kind of cooperation do you want? Raza didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, You haven't answered my earlier question yet. Black Zetsu's face darkened, but he gave a short reply. I am the manifestation of Mother's will, born from the power of the Otsutsuki, not created from chakra. And what about the other half of your body? That question made Black Zetsu even more certain the man standing before him truly knew too much. That's one of the white Zetsu created from the 10 tails chakra 1,000 years ago by Mother herself. Even Hashirama has no control over them. I see. With that, Raza finally asked the question that mattered most to him. Then, do you have a method that can completely block the Sage of Six Paths from using others' chakra to sense into our world? That will be the foundation of our conversation. Black Zetsu's expression grew more unpleasant, but he still replied. The Tenjin Fuin, a sealing technique that fuses a ninja's chakra with the surrounding natural world. It can mask someone from Hashirama's sensing abilities. Very good. Give me that technique, and we can proceed with the rest of our discussion. Seeing Raza's commanding tone, Black Zetsu's expression turned dark as he said coldly. Why? What makes you think I would simply hand it over? Raza's answer was straightforward. Because I know everything about you, while you know nothing about me. In my current state, I can easily prevent Kagaya Otsutsuki's resurrection. If you don't believe me, I can go to Amigakure right now and destroy Nagato's eyes. Black Zetsu's face turned darker than ever before, and yet he found himself helpless in the face of it. Still, he wouldn't give in so easily. You think you can threaten me with that? Even if you destroy those eyes, so what? I've waited nearly 1,000 years already. I can wait another 1,000. I'll wait until another Hashirama and Madara appear. But can you live that long? Raza didn't argue. Instead, he replied calmly. You're right. That's why I'm not threatening you. I'm simply making it clear that I have the leverage and qualifications to work with you. And to be honest, I don't even intend to stop Kagaya Otsutsuki's resurrection. That caught Black Zetsu even more off guard. You think I'll believe that? Do you also hate this world? No. I don't hate this world. In fact, I rather like it. As for your mother, as the embodiment of Kagaya's will, you should understand this better than me. Reviving her doesn't require destroying this world. And frankly, if I were Kagaya Otsutsuki, I wouldn't destroy it either. Why? Simple, Raza said. That's the answer to the question you just asked me, why I want to cooperate with you. Because we have a common enemy, the Otsutsuki clan. Black Zetsu's pupils visibly trembled, an involuntary response born of fear. Kagaya Otsutsuki's deep-seated fear of her own clan was clearly passed down through the will she left behind, Black Zetsu. To further emphasize his point, Raza revealed an even more terrifying piece of information. As a show of good faith in our cooperation, I'll even throw in a bonus intel, Ishiki isn't dead. Cold sweat broke out on Black Zetsu's forehead as he snapped, almost frantically. Impossible. Mother fed Ishiki to the 10 tails. Raza raised his brow as if he were looking at a complete idiot. Stop lying to yourself. You should know better than anyone that what Kaguya fed to the 10 tails was only half of Ishiki's body. The other half escaped. He has survived by assuming a new identity and is currently observing this world from the shadows. If you don't believe me, look into it yourself. His current identity is a monk named Jigen. But be careful, I'm not entirely sure how much of his power he's recovered. If he captures and seals you, that would be unfortunate. Seeing how confidently Raza spoke, even Black Zetsu couldn't deny the possibility any longer. How could this be? Raza pressed on, his tone becoming colder. Also, you should be aware that the time you calculated for the chakra fruit's maturation has long since passed. It won't be long now before the Otsutsuki clan sends someone to retrieve it. Ishiki, and whoever else they send. Do you really believe that even if your mother Kaguya is resurrected, she can defeat them? After that, Raza pressed further. To be honest, I'd sooner believe your unfilial child could take on the Otsutsuki clan before I'd bet on your mother. Sure, Kaguya has overwhelming power, but when it comes to actual combat, she's not particularly good at it. Black Zetsu's expression darkened. Though he didn't want to admit flaws about his mother, he couldn't help but acknowledge that, should that day truly come, her fate might already be sealed. And as for Hagoromo, who sealed her once, he was obviously not an ally. Maybe, this man standing before him truly was the better option. There was something strange and unfathomable about the power he wielded. But Black Zetsu continued to speak with guarded suspicion. Is that so? Then why not cooperate with that Hagoromo bastard instead? Simple, Raza replied. I'm not someone who likes to subordinate myself to others, whether they're righteous or evil. To me, both your mother, Kaguya, and the Sage of Six Paths, Hagoromo, are terrifying tigers. And if I absolutely must choose a side, then I'd rather go with the weaker one. After all, your mother is currently sealed. Even if she intends to do me harm, she'll have to wait until she escapes the seal first. It was a flawless argument, but Black Zetsu wasn't the type to agree easily. I'll need time to consider. With that, he began sinking into the earth. No problem, Raza replied. When you're ready, come find me in Sunagakure. Don't worry, I'll know the moment you appear in the village. Raza said, and then he remembered something he was forgetting. Oh, and that sealing technique? Black Zetsu spat out a scroll before vanishing completely. Raza picked it up and his eyes gleamed. His goal was now more or less achieved. As for whether Black Zetsu had tampered with the sealing formula, Raza wasn't concerned at all. As long as the jutsu could truly block the Sage of Six Paths from sensing chakra, that was enough. Even if the two versions of Black Zetsu from both worlds managed to connect using this technique, as long as Kaguya remained sealed on the moon, Raza had nothing to fear. Now, it was time for the next step of the plan. By briefly testing the technique, Raza confirmed that it could be powered by Senjutsu chakra. Moreover, it truly could create a chakra-blind nation. He returned directly to the Kazekage's office. Looking at the 3 children he had taken in, he placed seals on each of them. The next step was to take them back to his own world. Chapter 194, The Power of Motherly Love. Sunagakure, the Wind Kage's residence. As the wife of the Kazekage, Kurura had begun experiencing some of the uncomfortable symptoms of pregnancy as her belly gradually grew larger. It was her first time becoming a mother, and at times, Kurura would feel overwhelmed and helpless. But even when she felt terrible, she would do her best to endure it, because she didn't want to trouble her husband. Raza-kun was the Kazekage of the entire village. Though he always carried himself with confidence and composure, Kurura could feel the weight of the pressure on his shoulders. In the past year, he had not allowed himself a moment of rest, dedicating himself completely to the welfare of the village. Especially now, during a time when Kumogakure and Iwagakure had joined forces to attack Sunagakure. Fortunately, good news had come just the day before. Raza-kun, along with Michikawa-kun and Pakura, had successfully defeated the advance units of Iwagakure and captured 2 of their Jinchuriki. This forced Iwagakure into a cautious position and instantly broke the dangerous deadlock that Sunagakure had been trapped in. This morning, when she went out to buy groceries, she once again heard cheers echoing through the village. It was all thanks to her husband, Raza-kun, and as his wife, Kurura felt incredibly proud. However, amidst her pride, perhaps due to the heightened emotions of pregnancy, she found herself having other thoughts as well. She knew she shouldn't feel this way, but she couldn't help wishing that she were the one fighting at her husband's side, not some other woman. As Kurura sat on the couch, gently stroking her belly and feeling ashamed for even thinking such thoughts, a knock came from the door outside. She snapped out of her reverie and was about to stand up when a lively voice rang out. "I got it, Kurura-sama, leave it to me." A cheerful figure dashed out from the bedroom and ran to the entrance. Seeing Hana in such high spirits, the tangled emotions in Kurura's heart seemed to ease a little. She had to admit, she truly liked Hana. If the child in her belly turned out to be a girl, she hoped she could grow up to be as joyful and bright as Hana. Just then, a delighted voice rang out from the entrance. "It's Raza-sama." Kurura turned her head and saw Raza, who had changed out of his shoes and coat, stepping into the house. She was about to happily stand up when Raza gently pressed her back down. "No need to get up." He came to the couch, sat down beside her, and gently placed a hand on her belly. "How is it? Has the baby been restless these past few days?" Feeling her husband's tenderness, all of Kurura's earlier worries and insecurities melted away. Her heart filled with sweetness as she answered. "Not so soon. The baby is still small, it'll be a few more months before it starts kicking." Hana quickly chimed in, eager to share her contribution. "Raza-sama, I've been taking really good care of Kurura-sama and the baby in her belly these past few days." "Thank you." Raza gently patted Hana's head as a reward, then turned back to his wife and said, "You've been working hard too, Kurura. As your husband, it's painful not being able to stay by your side." "No." Kurura shook her head. "I understand, Raza-kun. As Kazekage, you belong to the entire village. I can't be that selfish." Hearing such a gentle and considerate response from his wife, what else could Raza do but pull her into a warm embrace? Watching from the side, Hana's cheeks turned bright red. Only when Kurura noticed the girl's gaze did she let go, a bit embarrassed. Raza also released her and said with a smile, "Besides coming to see you today, I brought you a gift." Then, as if second-guessing himself, he added, "Well, I suppose it counts as a gift?" "Eh?" Kurura blinked, confused by his hesitant tone. Raza called Hana over as well and then placed a seal on both of them, the heavenly seal of origin. Kurura and Hana both felt something strange coursing through them and looked around in amazement. "This is called the heavenly seal of origin," Raza explained. "While this seal is active, it can completely block your chakra and your presence from any external sensory perception." "Amazing!" Hana tried using her sensing abilities and was shocked to find she could no longer sense Kurura's chakra at all. Kurura, on the other hand, simply looked at her husband with eyes full of wonder. She knew Raza would never do something meaningless. Just then, Raza waved his hand, and a distortion appeared in the room, an actual rift in space. Kurura quickly realized, the gift he mentioned, was likely inside that rift. But, what exactly could it be? "Come on out," Raza said. In Kurura's astonished gaze, 3 children stepped out of the space-time rift, eyes full of alertness, confusion, and wonder as they looked around. But the moment their eyes fell on Kurura, their pupils shrank in shock, as though they recognized her. Kurura was stunned. "What is going on?" Before she could even react, the blonde girl in front, clearly the oldest, had already run straight into her arms, crying uncontrollably with tears streaming down her face. Kurura didn't push her away. She trusted her husband completely. As long as Raza was present, she believed there was no danger. But still, what was happening? She was sure she didn't know this girl. Yet oddly, it wasn't just the blonde child who seemed to recognize her. Another boy with face paint had tears welling up in his eyes too. He clearly wanted to come forward but didn't dare take the step. And finally, the smallest boy, with red hair and the word love etched on his forehead, his body trembled as he stared at her, eyes brimming with emotion. Kurura was completely lost. She could only turn toward her husband for answers. Raza finally spoke up. These 3 children are named Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara. They're our children. Kurura wasn't the only one shocked this time. Even Hana stood frozen, her brain barely processing what she'd just heard. Knowing how absurd it all sounded, Raza patiently continued, pointing at the girl in Kurura's arms. If history proceeds without deviation, Kurura, the child you're carrying right now, is this girl, Temari. Temari slowly lifted her tear-streaked face and looked at the woman who looked exactly like the mother in her memories. She couldn't hold back any longer and cried out, "Mom!" Even if Kurura had been confused before, by this point, she could sense the truth. She turned to Raza, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Raza-kun, could it be that there?" Raza nodded. "Yes. The full explanation is complicated. But to put it simply, because of a certain special power, I used space-time ninjutsu and ended up in what may be Sunigakure 13 years in the future. I investigated thoroughly. Although the 2 worlds are very similar, ultimately, they are not the same world." Chapter 195, 2 Sand Villages. At that moment, Raza's words not only resolved the doubts in Kurura's heart but also left the 3 siblings, Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara, utterly shocked. At the same time, they finally understood why their father had been acting strangely all along. So, something like this is really possible? Kurura looked completely incredulous. Hana covered her mouth in astonishment. Raza nodded in agreement. "I think it's unbelievable too, but it truly happened. And, how should I put this, that version of me from the future didn't seem to be a very good father." The moment those words fell, the expressions on the 3 siblings subtly changed. Kurura, especially after sensing the familiar chakra and the faint but undeniable scent of blood coming from Gaara, seemed to understand something. But no matter what, they are still our children. So there are things I simply couldn't ignore. That's why I brought them here. Besides, with them around to look after you, I can feel more at ease. Having said that, Raza looked toward the 3 siblings. "Of course, if you don't want to stay, that's fine too." "No." Temari immediately shook her head. "I want to stay with Mother." Kankuro also nodded firmly in agreement. As for Gaara, though his eyes were wet, he still managed to ask the one question that lingered in his heart. "So, are you really our father?" The question made both Temari and Kankuro's expressions shift slightly with unease. Raza thought for a moment and then replied, "That's a difficult question to answer definitively. But I believe that sometimes, the answer itself doesn't matter as much as how we choose to see things. At the very least, the reason I was able to bring you here is because I already considered you my children." Gaara's pupils contracted slightly, and Temari and the others' eyes lit up. Kurura, sensing the emotions in her husband's heart, reached out and gently stroked Temari's head with tenderness. Feeling that familiar gentleness once again, Temari couldn't hold back any longer and cried out, "Mom!" Seeing this, Raza gave a small nod. "Looks like you've all already made up your minds. Very well. From now on, live here in this version of Sunigakure for a while. Get familiar with it, see what's different between the 2 villages. But during this time, you must hide your identities. Also, no chakra use or ninjutsu. Baki, come in." At Raza's command, Baki, who had been waiting outside, walked in, curiously eyeing the 3 children. The trio also stared at the younger version of their teacher Baki, full of surprise at how much younger she looked. "Their names are Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara. Have the ANBU arrange identities for them? Baki didn't question it much. After all, over the past year, the Kazekage had already brought in 2 highly gifted children, Hana and Anoka, from other parts of the shinobi world. This wasn't exactly unprecedented. Got it. Thanks for your work. Go on ahead. Oh, and pass on my order, have Yashimaru return from the front lines. The moment they heard that name, all 3 siblings were visibly stunned again. As Baki left, Temari finally couldn't help but ask. Uncle Yashimaru, he's alive too? That question made Karura's heart tremble. Did it mean that in the future timeline, her little brother had died? Thankfully, Raza's next words eased her heart. Yes. That's exactly why I said our 2 worlds are not the same. It's not just Yashimaru, Pakura, Michikawa, they're all alive and well in our timeline. There are also others you don't know. For example, the child beside you is Hana. She's from the Uzumaki clan and is Elder Chiyo's disciple. There's another child named Anoka, also from the Uzumaki clan. She's Elder Ebizo's disciple. Uzumaki. Kankuro didn't really understand what the Uzumaki clan was, but he was definitely familiar with the name Uzumaki. Isn't that the same surname as that idiot Naruto from Konoha? Exactly. Raza nodded. That boy, Naruto Uzumaki, is the child of Konoha's 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. Just like Gaara, he's currently the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. That revelation utterly stunned the 3 siblings. You're kidding, right, Dad? That idiot is actually the child of the 4th Hokage. Temari blurted out instinctively. Kankuro also suddenly connected the dots. No wonder that idiot always seemed to care about Gaara. Gaara's pupils shrank in surprise at that, but at that moment, a gentle figure approached him slowly and embraced him tightly. The instinctual rage boiling inside Gaara made him want to resist, but the warmth of that voice and that familiar embrace completely froze him in place. You've suffered so much, Gaara. He couldn't control it. A single tear slowly fell from Gaara's eye. He desperately wanted not to cry, to avoid looking so weak and pathetic, but it was useless. The tears just kept falling. In that moment, everyone around could feel the sorrow in this cold and distant boy's heart. Karura held Gaara even tighter. The moment her husband revealed that Gaara was a Jinchuriki, Karura already knew what kind of pain her future son must have endured. No wonder the Raza from that world had failed as a father. And the name Gaara itself carried a deep sorrow from that other world that Karura could feel in her soul. Watching this scene, Raza felt as if one of the deepest regrets in his heart had finally been given closure. He didn't want to interrupt as Karura used a mother's love to slowly dissolve Gaara's pain. So, turning to Hana, Temari, and Kankuro, Raza said, Hana, stay here. Temari, Kankuro, come with me. In the realm of Yomi. Temari and Kankuro followed Raza as he led them back into this strange world. Though they had only recently been here, the sight still filled them with awe. Before them stretched an immense space, as if they were floating through the universe. Countless stone orbs the size of fists floated in the air like stars, and at the very center of this dense stellar field stood a towering divine tree that reached into the sky. Raza brought Temari and Kankuro beneath the god tree. Without any cryptic build-up, he got straight to the point as they looked at him with questioning eyes. There's only one reason I brought you here, because, as my children, you're both far too weak. Temari and Kankuro froze in place, their expressions stiffening. Especially when you're up against someone like Naruto Uzumaki, who carries both the Uzumaki bloodline and the power of the Nine-Tails, or Sasuke Uchiha, who carries the power of the Uchiha clan. I don't belong in your world, and I can't stay there for long. So now, I will bestow upon you a kind of power. The 2 siblings were visibly shaken. Kankuro looked especially thrilled, while Temari, though also intrigued, showed a trace of concern. What about Gaara? Gaara's situation is unique. The one tail inside him will interfere with this power. So from now on, as his elder sister and elder brother, it's your turn to protect him. Chapter 196, The Mist's Poisonous Plan. Temari and Kankuro's process of gaining new powers went smoothly. This not only proved that Raza's idea was correct, that the god tree he planted could transform the people of this world into a constitution capable of naturally using senjutsu energy, but also meant that he had embedded a stake in this future parallel timeline. As for what kind of effect the stake would have, that would depend on how useful this future world would be to him. However, some things were verified during this process. Namely, the type of chakra fruit produced by the senjutsu constitution gained through the god tree, and the special abilities that came with it, were not determined by Raza's will. The bloodline present more influenced the individual's body. For example, the abilities Temari and Kankuro gained were exactly the same. Wind release plus magnet release. No other abilities at all. The god tree in Raza's underworld was grown from Hashirama's chakra fruit and Shikaku's chakra. This also allowed Raza, after a year, to regain the power of wind release. After all, wind release was one of Shikaku's innate abilities. As for the rest, Raza already possessed them. Raza had originally expected that once Temari and Kankuro injected their chakra, the new constitution they obtained would include some of Shikaku's abilities, such as sand manipulation or magnet release sealing techniques, but unfortunately, none of those manifested. Raza had particularly hoped for sand manipulation or magnet release sealing arts. Unfortunately, there were none. Still, the senjutsu-infused wind release and magnet release provided a significant power boost for both of them. Regarding the current lack of senjutsu energy in the future timeline, that is indeed a problem. However, Raza believes 2 years will be sufficient to resolve it. In the time that followed, Raza became even busier. His own world was already in the midst of a shinobi world war, and he had numerous matters to handle daily. Now, with the arrival of a future timeline, he became so busy that he barely had time to breathe. Fortunately, it was all worth it. Because of the existence of the 2 timelines, Raza now had an extra trump card to ensure his survival. He could take bold action against the tailed beasts, which would rapidly increase his power. Once he possessed the strength to truly dance freely in this world, he wouldn't need to act so cautiously anymore. Just like that, time passed slowly. Both timelines began progressing according to their own histories. First, in Raza's original timeline, after he captured 2 Jinchuriki from Iwagakure, the stalemate Sunagakure had been facing was instantly broken. Both Iwagakure and Kumogakure chose to back down, and the previously tense situation quickly eased. However, several days passed, and Iwagakure still hadn't sent anyone to negotiate the ransom for their 2 Jinchuriki. This made the situation seem rather strange. In truth, it wasn't just Sunagakure that was confused, even Kumogakure and Kanahagakure couldn't understand what was going on. What exactly was Inoki of Iwagakure thinking? 2 of his village's precious Jinchuriki had been captured, and yet there had been no response from Iwagakure. Little did they know, Inoki was having a major headache of his own. Inoki had fallen into a state of helplessness ever since he learned that Sunagakure had captured Rashi and Han. He didn't even need to think about it because if he negotiated with Sunagakure, they would definitely make outrageous demands. However, trying to use force instead, the current Iwagakure simply wasn't capable of that. It could only be said that Inoki's worst fear had come true. Sunagakure had truly become a fierce tiger. He read every word of the intel coming from the front lines. Setting aside Raza, the Kazekage, who had demonstrated power enough to effortlessly suppress 2 full-tailed beast forms alone, even his 2 trusted aides, Pakura and Michikawa, had displayed strength comparable to full-tailed beasts. One had to understand, in all of Iwagakure, the only person capable of such feats was Inoki himself. But now, Sunagakure had 3 such individuals. This meant that, in terms of top-tier power, Sunagakure had already surpassed Iwagakure. Perhaps only Kanahagakure could still match them now. As for Kumogakure, there was no need to even bring them up. Besides that old man, the third Raikage, the rest, including his son and the village's 2 Jinchuriki, hadn't matured yet. Maybe in 10 years they'd be able to challenge Sunagakure, but right now? Not a chance. Especially when considering Sunagakure's demonstrated ability to suppress tailed beasts, this made it even more impossible for the Third Raikage to risk sending his Jinchuriki into battle. This is a real headache. What should I do now? Inoki genuinely had no idea how to save face or turn the situation around. That was also why, after so many days, he still hadn't made a decision. But just then, a group of unexpected visitors appeared, a delegation from Kirigakure. Inoki was quite surprised by this. Ever since the Second Shinobi World War 10 years ago, when his teacher, the Second Tsuchikage, Mu, perished together with the Second Mizukage, Jinjetsu Hozuki, the two villages had become sworn enemies. The hatred between them was even deeper than that between Iwagakure and either Konohagakure or Sunagakure. Logically speaking, Inoki should not have agreed to meet with these Kirigakure shinobi. However, given Iwagakure's current difficult situation, he decided to at least hear them out. And then, Inoki received some troubling news. So you're saying that Sunagakure also used Kirigakure? Yes. As soon as the subject came up, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, Juzo Biwa, showed an expression of anger. Mizukage-sama never expected that Sunagakure would manipulate us like this. While Mizukage-sama did intend to cooperate with Sunagakure, they not only flatly rejected the offer but also exploited Mizukage-sama's goodwill. At this point, Inoki could confirm that Sunagakure truly hadn't entered into any collaboration with Kirigakure. However, it was already too late to dwell on that. So, what does your Mizukage want? The Mizukage's intention is simple. Since we've all been used by Sunagakure, why not become allies instead? Our request is also simple. The girl from the Uzumaki clan and Sunagakure must be handed over to us. Inoki's brow furrowed. And what benefit does Iwagakure gain from cooperating with Kirigakure? Juzo Biwa glanced around. Inoki immediately understood and had everyone in the area retreat. He even set up a sealing barrier. Kirigakure may have received the 3 tails and 6 tails from the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, but due to our lack of sealing techniques, our attempts to create Jinchuriki have always ended in failure. Inoki's frown deepened. Don't waste my time with meaningless talk. But Juzo Biwa didn't mind and instead said something that made Inoki's pupils contract. No. Tsuchikage-sama, a successful Jinchuriki indeed has value as a weapon. But even a failed Jinchuriki is not useless. Because they can destroy themselves, and take the enemy with them. Chapter 197, Goodbye Black Zetsu. Future Timeline. Sunagakure. The deaths of the 2 elders indeed caused quite a stir within Sunagakure, but with the Umbu in control and Chio and Ebizo stepping in, the situation was swiftly suppressed. As for the official reason for executing the 2 elders, it was claimed they had collaborated with the Konoha rogue ninja Orochimaru in a plot to assassinate the Kazekage. Sometimes, the excuse didn't matter. After all, those around them had no means to verify the truth. Just as things were beginning to settle down in Sunagakure, the final word arrived from Konoha. The 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had indeed been confirmed dead at the hands of his former student, Orochimaru. One of the legendary Sannin, princess of the Senju clan, Tsunade Senju, had succeeded him as the 5th Hokage. Not long after Tsunade took office, she immediately sent an official letter to Sunagakure, demanding an explanation for the attack on Konoha during the Chunin exams. But Raza, after merely glancing at the letter, tossed it aside and said to the visiting Konoha ninja, "Go tell your new Hokage, if she wants an explanation, she can bring her shinobi and come to the land of wind herself." The implication was clear. There would be no explanation, only war. After sending off the visibly furious Konoha shinobi, Baki asked with some concern, "Is this really all right, Kazekage-sama?" Well, after spending the past few days together, Raza had noticed something. This timeline's Baki was more timid than the one from his own timeline, especially when it came to dealing with Konoha. Not that he could blame him. In this future world, Raza had never existed in the past. Don't worry. Konoha right now doesn't have the strength to wage war against us. Though still a bit hesitant, Baki nodded. By the way, in the coming days, I'll be taking Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara to a special place for training. If you need to see them, just let me know, I'll bring them back. Baki's sweat dropped, but he shook his head. No, it's naturally best if Kazekage-sama personally trains them. Raza smiled and nodded. Good. I'll be counting on you to manage the village for now. Hi! After Baki took his leave, Raza, having sensed Black Zetsu's reappearance, turned into sand and vanished from his office. On a cliff not far from Sunegakure's Heavens Line Canyon, Raza stood there, facing the newly reappeared Black Zetsu, who was on high alert. So? Have you made up your mind? Black Zetsu's voice was hoarse. Let's talk about how this cooperation is supposed to work first. Hearing that, Raza felt confident the collaboration was indeed moving forward, and his interest was piqued. Did you find traces of Jigen, or rather, Ishiki? Black Zetsu didn't respond, but his serious demeanor already said enough. Seeing that, Raza didn't waste time with unnecessary words. It's simple. First, we share the same goal, to stand against the looming threat of the Otsutsuki clan, and specifically the hidden presence of Ishiki Otsutsuki. For that, power is essential. And to gain that power, or rather, to revive Kaguya, the tailed beasts are indispensable. That gives us the foundation for our alliance. So you're saying you want to help me capture the tailed beasts? Even if I needed help with that, isn't the One-Tailed Jinchuriki your own son? Black Zetsu said in a sinister tone. No. Of course, I won't help you capture the tailed beasts. You already have the Akatsuki at your disposal, so capturing them isn't a problem for you. As for Shikaku inside Gaara, I won't hand him over to you either. But at the same time, I won't stop you. My children have their own paths to walk. Black Zetsu looked at Raza, completely unable to discern what he was really thinking. What a cold-blooded father. So, what do you want from me in return? All information on the tailed beasts. I need the chakra of all the tailed beasts. Black Zetsu's non-existent eyebrows knitted together slightly. Seeing this, Raza explained. Relax. I only want half the chakra from each of the tailed beasts. It's just a small portion for them. They'll recover quickly. If you're concerned, you can follow me and watch as I extract it. Black Zetsu fell silent, pondering. After a while, he finally spoke. What do you want their chakra for? That's something I don't believe I need to explain to you. Black Zetsu wasn't irritated by the refusal. Instead, his gaze shifted to Raza's right hand. Then can you explain why you carry Mother's presents? Exclamation point. Raza was briefly stunned. Then, sensing Black Zetsu's gaze, he looked at the comma on his right hand and asked curiously. You mean this, comma? Don't ask me, I was going to ask you the same thing. As Kaguya's will, shouldn't you understand better than I do why I bear her comma? Black Zetsu's expression turned grave. After some thought, he slowly said. That's what puzzles me. This shouldn't be possible. But if I had to offer an explanation, there's only one possibility. Heh. Raza gave him a sideways glance and said. You know, I really hate people who speak in riddles. Humph. Black Zetsu snorted before finally explaining. Mother did abandon her comma, but that doesn't mean she gave up her immortality. Instead, she embedded her comma into the chakra of this world. Chakra! Raza was visibly startled, as though he had just realized something. No wonder Kaguya couldn't be killed, only sealed. Exactly. After Mother embedded her comma into the chakra of this world, she essentially became one with it. That means, any life form using chakra in this world can serve as a vessel for a resurrection. Then Raza suddenly thought of something. But that vessel wouldn't include Hagoromo. Of course not. Black Zetsu smirked faintly at this point. Otherwise, do you think Hagoromo would be hiding away in the Pure Land, never daring to return to the shinobi world? Because the moment he appears, the chakra inside him would resonate with Mother's will, awakening it. Raza narrowed his eyes. That doesn't add up. After sealing Kagaya, didn't Hagoromo go on to found Ninshu, raise his children, and live a full life before passing on? That's because at that time, Hagoromo's chakra wasn't yet complete. He had absorbed the Ten-Tails chakra, but not its body. However, as he continued cultivating, his chakra grew stronger, and he began sensing traces of Mother's consciousness within it. That's why he ultimately split the Ten-Tails chakra, distributed it among others, and founded Ninshu. He realized that since Mother had merged with the Ten-Tails, her resurrection was inevitable. Even without the God Tree, the Ten-Tails' latent power hidden within chakra would endlessly convert the world's natural energy into chakra. That's why he entrusted his power to his two sons, hoping that one day, they might once again seal Mother away. Chapter 198, Capturing the Tailed Beast, Part 1. At that moment, Raza felt like he had uncovered many of the world's deepest secrets. At the same time, he also finally understood why, apart from the Sage of Six Paths taking action against him once after his sudden arrival in this world, the sage from his original world had never moved against him. For one, perhaps the Sage of Six Paths genuinely had no means to act against him. And two, maybe, just maybe, the sage was even pleased to see him transforming chakra into senjutsu energy because that would lessen the chances of Kagaya's resurrection. But none of that mattered to Raza. He would never put his own safety in someone else's hands. I understand. So, what do you think about our cooperation? Black Zetsu also returned to his senses and stated his own condition. Fine. But I have one request. Raza raised his brow. What is it? I want that chakra fruit as well. Raza glanced at Black Zetsu and refused without the slightest hesitation. Stop dreaming. You seem to have misunderstood something. Do you really think I couldn't obtain what I want without you? The reason I sought cooperation with you was simply for convenience. Black Zetsu's expression turned somewhat sour. Then what do I get in return? My not interfering with your plan is already the greatest help you'll receive. Aside from that, before Kagaya is resurrected, I can help you stop Ishiki. Although Ishiki's appearance belongs to the later Boruto timeline, still years away, Black Zetsu had no way of knowing that. And besides, given how Raza had altered the flow of events, there was no guarantee that Ishiki wouldn't act sooner than expected. Black Zetsu hesitated, but eventually asked, You're sure you won't intervene? Raza posed far too great a threat to Black Zetsu now, just one step beneath Hagoromo himself. Don't worry. I'm very interested in Kagaya's resurrection. In fact, if your mother can be brought back without destroying the world, we might even become allies, united against the future Otsutsuki. Black Zetsu fell into deep thought, but eventually agreed. It wasn't that Black Zetsu trusted Raza easily. Rather, as Kagaya's will, his fear of the Otsutsuki clan was deeply ingrained, especially after recently confirming signs of Ishiki's presence through his investigations. Since you've agreed, then let's not waste any more time and begin. But before we move, to make collecting the tailed beast's chakra go more smoothly, I may need to borrow the identity of Akatsuki. Land of the Sea. A certain island shrouded in thick mist. Blood-curdling screams frequently echoed from the island, causing nearby pirates and fishermen to steer far away from it. Deep within the island, in a vast cavern, one could distinctly see human-made structures. Inside these prison-like buildings lived humanoid figures, monsters emanating terrifying auras. The mysterious markings on their faces and bodies made it clear what these creatures truly were. Yes, this was one of Orochimaru's secret research bases, specifically dedicated to the study of cursed seals. And these monsters were his test subjects. Deep within the cavern, in a room dimly lit by oil lamps, Orochimaru, having just completed his living corpse reincarnation, slowly unwrapped his bandages. Staring at the unfamiliar face in the mirror, he let out a chilling laugh. At his side, his assistant Kabuto knelt on the ground, his entire body trembling. Where's Sasuke? It turned out that, after his plan to have Tsunade heal his arms failed, Orochimaru had decided to proceed with his backup plan, luring Sasuke in to become his next vessel. Originally, he had intended to directly possess Sasuke. But his subordinates acted too slowly, and his body couldn't hold out until Sasuke arrived. So he had no choice but to pick a different vessel from within the base and perform the transfer. However, right after the transfer was complete, Orochimaru was already dissatisfied with the new body. He could feel the compatibility between the body and his soul was far too low. But once the living corpse reincarnation was cast, there was no turning back. And now, he had to wait another 3 years before he could do it again. This greatly displeased him. A freezing aura radiated from his entire body, causing Kabuto to tremble all the more. Upon hearing Orochimaru's question, Kabuto quickly responded. Orochimaru-sama, those Konoha brats are more troublesome than expected. But Kimimaro has already been sent. There shouldn't be any problem. He. Orochimaru didn't press the issue further, instead switching topics. What about that Kazekage? What did your investigation find? Hearing this, Kabuto let out a small sigh of relief. There doesn't appear to be anything unusual. And it's not just us, even according to the intel from that person, the organization also sent someone to investigate. But they found nothing. Hearing this, Orochimaru sneered. How interesting. So even Akatsuki is paying attention to him. Kabuto then seemed to recall something, speaking with confusion. It really is strange, Orochimaru-sama. While that Kazekage was certainly powerful, it took you, me, and Kimimaro combined to defeat him, but from the reports of his later battle with Jiraiya-sama, it seems he's become much stronger than he was when he fought us. And even more bizarre, after being revived, he didn't come for revenge against you. What's going on here? Orochimaru raised a brow. Oh? And what do you think? Kabuto adjusted his glasses. I'm not sure either. That's what puzzles me. And there's one more piece of intel from Konoha, Danzo of Root, he's dead too. This time, a flicker of shock finally appeared on Orochimaru's face. What happened? I haven't gotten full details yet, but during the time when you were fighting the third Hokage, Root was attacked by that same fourth Kazekage. It was almost as if he had everything planned out in advance. I even started to wonder if the man we killed was truly the real fourth Kazekage. But with Edo Tensei, it's impossible to fake the identity. Orochimaru's gaze darkened. Everything that was happening was making him increasingly uneasy. It's definitely strange. Just as that thought crossed Orochimaru's mind, terrified screams suddenly echoed from outside the base. What's going on? Are we under attack? Both Orochimaru and Kabuto were startled. Especially Orochimaru, known as the Slippery Snake, his advantage lay in his summon, snakes. Their scouting and counter-scouting capabilities were second to none. Yet now, not a single warning from his summoned snakes. It was Kabuto who made the call. Looks like this place has been exposed. Orochimaru-sama, in your current condition, it's not wise to fight. Let's retreat for now. Orochimaru wasn't someone who clung to pride unnecessarily. He nodded in agreement. But just as the two of them exited the base through a hidden passage and prepared to leave the island, a voice rang out behind them. Orochimaru, where do you think you're going? Orochimaru turned around, and his pupils instantly contracted. Chapter 199, Capturing the Tailed Beast, Part 2. Mist clung tightly to the shoreline. Orochimaru and Kabuto both stared wide-eyed at the two men standing before them. That black cloak adorned with red clouds, no one could be more familiar with it than Orochimaru, who had once been a member of Akatsuki. Kabuto, too, instantly recognized it. After all, both of his former masters had come from that very organization. At first, both of them thought the two figures had come to settle old scores. But then Orochimaru's sharp gaze caught something unusual. His expression shifted into disbelief for a moment, then steadied as realization dawned. A faint smile appeared on his lips. How interesting. Since when did the fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure join Akatsuki? Thanks to Orochimaru's reminder, Kabuto quickly realized something too. The man in the cloak and straw hat, his face half obscured, was unmistakably Raza, the fourth Kazekage of Sunigakure, the same man who had supposedly died at their hands, and the very one they had just been discussing. What in the world was going on? Indeed, it was Raza who stood before them now, and the man beside him was none other than Black Zetsu. Raza, however, had no intention of answering Orochimaru's question. He simply asked, "Orochimaru, are you interested in seeing a broader world?" Orochimaru was startled. Then, as he grasped the implications, he licked his lips, visibly excited. "Does this have something to do with your resurrection?" "You could say that." Raza's tone remained calm. At that, Orochimaru completely relaxed. "Oh? Then what brings the Kazekage of Sunigakure to me?" Without a word, Raza pulled out a set of Akatsuki robes from his sleeve and tossed them to Orochimaru. Orochimaru caught them, looking a little surprised. Only then did Raza speak again. "From here on, I'll be using the identity of Akatsuki to capture the tailed beasts and extract some of their chakra. While I could do this alone, for the sake of convenience, I need a partner. And no one is more suitable than you, a former member of Akatsuki." Orochimaru was stunned, his gaze shifting to the figure beside Raza, Zetsu. As a former member of Akatsuki, Orochimaru certainly recognized Zetsu. And that's precisely what made things so strange. Based on Raza's words, he was merely borrowing Akatsuki's name, implying he wasn't truly part of the group. So then, what was Zetsu doing by his side? Could it be that Zetsu, one of Akatsuki's intelligence agents, had also betrayed the organization? Orochimaru couldn't make sense of it. But since he couldn't, he didn't bother to think too hard. How fascinating. Orochimaru didn't refuse. Holding the Akatsuki cloak in his hands, he looked at Raza with clear interest. "I do have one question, though. I wonder if the Kazekage Dano might indulge me?" Raza remained unfazed. "Ask." He. "Could you tell me how you managed to come back to life?" Raza wasn't surprised by the question. He responded half-truthfully. "Strictly speaking, I don't owe you an answer. But for now, I'll tell you this. I broke free from the control of the Sage of Six Paths through a special method, and then used a unique jutsu to resurrect myself." At those words, Orochimaru's eyes gleamed with an intense light, while Kabuto beside him trembled all over. Sage of Six Paths. Isn't he supposed to be a mythical figure? Could he actually be real? Raza let out a soft snort and looked at Orochimaru. "Orochimaru, with your intelligence, you should have long figured it out. Where do you think the souls summoned by Edo Tensei come from?" Orochimaru gave a sinister smile, visibly excited, while Kabuto was so shocked he was left speechless. "Then, if I agree to help, what do I get in return?" "A vast world and such. It sounds rather far-fetched to me." Raza paused for a moment and thought. "You're right. In that case, as long as I successfully capture the two tails through seven tails, I'll return the arms sealed by the dead demon-consuming seal to you. How's that?" Orochimaru was stunned, then broke into a wide grin. "Deal!" With that, Orochimaru once again donned the Akatsuki cloak. His expression was tinged with nostalgia as he looked at Raza and Black Zetsu. How nostalgic. So then, where are we headed next? Raza had already made up his mind. "We're going to the land of water. Let's capture the only wild-tailed beast first, the three tails." Konohagakure. 3 days had passed since Naruto and Sasuke's intense battle at the Valley of the End, and Naruto's failure to bring Sasuke back. Because of Raza's earlier intervention, this time, the team pursuing Sasuke had no assistance from Sunigakure's trio. Though they eventually won their respective battles, it was a brutal victory at best. Fortunately, the current 5th Hokage of Konoha was none other than the greatest medical ninja in the entire ninja world, Tsunade. Without her, it would have been uncertain whether the Konoha 11 could even be saved. This incident strengthened Jiraiya's resolve to take Naruto away for training. However, when he presented this idea to Tsunade, she unsurprisingly refused. Naruto was the village's Jinchuriki. There was no way the village could allow him to leave, especially in such chaotic times. But Jiraiya's one sentence swept away all of Tsunade's objections. "Tsunade, there is no place in this world safer than by my side." And so, Tsunade was convinced. Naruto, eager to grow stronger and bring Sasuke back, naturally had no objections either. Yet just as Jiraiya was preparing to leave Konoha with Naruto, an unexpected message arrived. "Jiraiya-sama, the great Toad Sage wishes to see you. Mount Myaboku." In the vast palace where the great Toad Sage resided, when Jiraiya laid eyes on the great Toad Sage again, he was taken aback. He had never seen him so serious before. This wasn't the forgetful old frog from his memories. Even Fukasaku and Shima, standing at his side, looked extremely grave. This gave Jiraiya a deeply uneasy feeling. "Great Toad Sage-sama, why have you summoned me?" The great Toad Sage's voice was completely devoid of his usual playfulness, stern and solemn as he spoke. "Jiraiya, remember carefully what I'm about to say." Jiraiya gulped a mouthful and nodded. "The future has changed. A soul that was never meant to exist in fate has appeared. I don't know what it means, but in my dream, I saw him. He is about to make a move on the tailed beasts and Jinchuriki. If he gathers the power of all 9, the entire ninja world will be destroyed." Jiraiya was shocked. He wanted to ask more, but the great Toad Sage had already fallen asleep, as if nothing had happened. All Jiraiya could do was leave Mount Myaboku in confusion and deep worry. And after he left, in a mysterious, pure realm beyond the living world. "Hagoromo, I've carried out your request. Jiraiya should begin noticing soon. But, even you can't identify the origin of that strange soul?" "No. I know where he comes from. What confuses me is how he escaped my control. But in any case, our plan must not be disrupted. It's not yet time for Mother to be revived. Indra and Azura have not yet fully matured." Before this white-haired elder, a transparent crystal orb hovered in the air. Inside the orb, the images of 2 figures shimmered, and before them lay a vast, still lake. Chapter 200, Capturing the Tailed Beast, Part 3. Ever since Yagura, the 4th Mizukage of Kirigakure and Jinchuriki of the Three Tails, was killed, the tailed beast within him, the Three Tails, had perished alongside him. Fortunately, tailed beasts cannot be killed permanently except through sealing, so not long after, the Three Tails revived. As for where it revived, Kirigakure naturally knew the location. After all, ever since the Sage of Six Paths created the 9-tailed beasts, he also found them places to dwell, places that became their respective homes. And this lake was precisely the dwelling that the Sage of Six Paths had chosen for the Three Tails. However, even though Kirigakure knew that the Three Tails had revived, they still made no attempt to recapture it. The reason was simple: Kirigakure no longer had the strength to capture or seal a tailed beast. At this point, Kirigakure's situation was even more pitiful than that of Tsunagakure. Tsunagakure had always been poor, but Kirigakure had been different. Despite having 3 powerful Kekkei Genkai clans and the formidable 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, the chaos within the village led to the eradication of the bloodline clans, and the swordsmen defected one after another. As a result, Kirigakure was now beset by internal strife and external threats. If not for its geographic advantage, similar to that of Tsunagakure, the village might have long since been devoured whole by the other great villages. Still, while they lacked the ability to capture the tailed beast, Kirigakure at least stationed guards at the lake where the Three Tails resided. After all, the Three Tails had been acquired from the first Hokage at great financial cost. If someone else captured it, Kirigakure would suffer a huge loss. Unfortunately, those station guards were no match for Orochimaru. Within just a dozen minutes, all of them had vanished without a trace. At the misty lakeside, Raza and Black Zetsu stood waiting in silence for only a short time. When Orochimaru emerged from the forest behind them, a hint of excitement on his face. Though his arms were unusable, many techniques of Orochimaru's serpent style didn't rely on his hands. Dealing with those low-level shinobi had been effortless. Handled? Minchim. Orochimaru nodded. At that moment, black Zetsus slowly began to sink into the ground. I fulfilled my promise and brought you here. The rest is none of my concern. With that, he completely disappeared from sight. Orochimaru's eyes gleamed with interest. He had already realized that this creature called Zetsu was far from simple, not just the silent informant he remembered from his time in Akatsuki. Well then, shall we? With that, Raza and Orochimaru stepped onto the surface of the lake. Roughly 10 minutes later, the two had reached its center. The area was thick with mist. Both Raza and Orochimaru could sense the vast chakra interwoven into the fog. Orochimaru glanced around and dipped his hand into the water. His yellow, snake-like eyes stared deep beneath the surface. This should be it. I can sense the immense chakra of the Three Tails. Raza sensed it too. Then I'll leave the rest to you, Orochimaru. Raza chose Orochimaru as a partner precisely because of the man's talents. It would save Raza a great deal of trouble. He. Leave it to me. As he spoke, Orochimaru pulled out a scroll. Upon unfurling it, a glass vial appeared, filled with a viscous purple liquid. What is that? Raza asked. Orochimaru gave a cold, sinister smile. A poison I've developed specifically for tailed beasts. It agitates them and drives them into a frenzy. As he finished speaking, a small white snake slithered out from his sleeve, bit onto the vial, and dove into the water. All done. Now all we have to do is wait. With everything in place, Orochimaru stood back up gracefully, looked at Raza with great interest, and asked. It may take a while for the poison to take effect. Raza-kun, may I ask you a question? Go ahead. Why did you choose me, Raza-kun? Raza naturally understood what Orochimaru meant. Staring out at the still lake, he calmly said. It's simple, Orochimaru, because you're not someone who bows to fate. Orochimaru was slightly taken aback. As Jiraiya's close friend, I'm sure you've heard him speak of that prophecy, haven't you? Ah. Orochimaru made a small sound, as if something had just come to mind. In my eyes, you and Jiraiya are complete opposites. You refuse to bow to fate, while Jiraiya is someone driven by it. His entire life has been spent searching for the so-called child of prophecy. At this point, Raza suddenly shifted the topic. Orochimaru, do you believe in fate? A glint flickered in Orochimaru's eyes as he slowly replied. Raza-kun, what exactly do you mean by fate? Raza thought for a moment before answering. Orochimaru, the reason you approached Sasuke and took him away from Konoha was to eventually take over his body using living corpse reincarnation, right? But what if I told you? Fate means that no matter how hard you try, you'll never succeed in possessing Uchiha Sasuke's body. On the contrary, all your efforts will only serve to benefit him. Under Orochimaru's slightly startled and skeptical gaze, Raza slowly turned his head to look at him. From the moment you witnessed Itachi Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan, when he subdued you with a Jinjutsu and sliced off your arm, your fate was already sealed. In that instant, Orochimaru suddenly felt a chill run through his body, cold sweat pouring down his forehead. Because he suddenly realized, it was true. Ever since that moment in Akatsuki when he witnessed the power of Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan and was defeated by the younger Uchiha, he had become obsessed with the Uchiha clan's power. At first glance, that obsession seemed understandable. The Mangekyo Sharingan was overwhelmingly powerful. But looking back now, something about it felt off. Orochimaru was by no means unfamiliar with the Sharingan. In fact, he had studied it in depth. After all, the Sharingan embedded in Danzo's arm was transplanted by him. He was well aware of how powerful the Mangekyo was, but not to the point of developing this almost religious fixation on it, treating it as if it were divine. Just then, as Raza sensed an abnormal fluctuation in Orochimaru's chakra, he seemed to realize something and said with mild surprise. So that's it. Orochimaru, you've been manipulated. Hearing Raza's muttered words, and already deeply unsettled, Orochimaru asked hesitantly. Raza-kun, did you discover something? Yeah. Raza quietly uttered words that made Orochimaru's blood run cold. Orochimaru, haven't you realized? You've been caught in a Jinjutsu all this time. And if I'm not mistaken, it should be the power of Shisui Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan, Kodo Amatsukami. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in part 9. Peace.